the Bennington Select Board meeting of November 25th. It is really wonderful to see almost no empty seats. Fantastic. So, I am Jeannie Jenkins, and I have the pleasure of chairing this board. And we want to welcome you all tonight, and I'll ask that fellow board members introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Nancy White.
Hi, good evening, Sarah Perrin.
I'm Ed Woods.
Hi, I'm Tom Haley.
Good evening, Clark Adams.
Jean Connor.
Excellent. And also with us tonight, we have our town manager, Stu Hurd.
Thank you.
We have Nancy Lively, who takes excellent minutes. And we have Josh Boucher from Cat TV, who is filming us live and does this reliably every 2 weeks. So we thank Cat TV and Josh very much for that. All right, so we will start this evening, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ed, would you lead us in the pledge?
I will. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ed. All right. Tom, would you read the vision statement that guides our work?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Bennington is a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life. Thank
you very much. All right. Next up is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of November 11th, the warrants, and no liquor licenses, right? Okay. All right. For the purposes of discussion, do I have, will someone make a motion to accept the minutes, the warrants?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll start off with an apology. I picked up 2 packets, and neither were today's packets, so I don't have the warrant right in front of me, but I can't recall the page.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know how that happens, yes.
Yes, I set it aside saying, I got to remember, and I picked up 2 weeks and 3 weeks.
Do you want to see warrants?
Tom just graciously loaned me his. If there's someone else, maybe let me just scroll through here. I don't want to hold folks up. Again, I apologize.
I can ask, let's see, page 6, on the minutes, page 6, line 192. Is that true? That doesn't look like that's, the last line, 192, it's the Unitarian Universalists. Anybody else? Well, Clark, okay, go ahead, Jean.
I don't know if this is necessary or if it's usually done. Nancy Lively behind me, you'll know. When we have voted on something and we circulate the paper for signatures, should that be in the minutes that the resolution or whatever it is was circulated for signatures? I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
There's no reason for it not to be. Do you want to add that to something?
Not necessarily. I'm just trying to decide if some people think it should.
I mean, if we all vote on it, then the assumption is we all signed it when it was circulated.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was important to know that the document needed to be signed, and we did sign it. So I just don't know.
I think that's a really good point because everybody doesn't always sign it. So that's good to bring up.
Why wouldn't everybody sign it if they vote yes? I mean, that's a question for a different day, but if you vote yes, then what you are voting is to sign. You can only not sign if you vote no, quite honestly. Because an abstention means that you go with the majority. So if the majority says yes, then that means abstentions and yeses must sign, and the only people who don't sign could be a no. Although, in the spirit of the way boards work, if the majority says yes, ostensibly everyone should sign.
So I think what you're saying is, if I'm understanding this correctly, please let me know if I'm not. Maybe we should make this into the minutes.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So where is that somewhere in here?
It's on page 4. Sorry, I turned my microphone off. Page 4, line 116. So it says the motion carried unanimously, which it did, and then possibly the letter was circulated to get signatures of board members. And I'm thinking we should probably always do that
Yeah.
when there's a document that we needed to sign to make it official.
It was a resolution or a letter?
It was the BBC. It was the BBC.
It was a resolution, right?
It was a letter of
okay.
attestation.
Okay.
That's what it was.
So there's a letter, and we should check. If everyone hasn't signed it, they should. Okay. Okay, so the letter was circulated. Okay.
The letter circulated for signature is what I'm...
Yep. For signature. Yep. Okay. Good catch. Thank you. Anything else on the minutes while we're on the minutes?
Nancy has her hand up.
Yes, please.
Page 3, lines 65 to 71, the statement that Mona Gauthier made, I think the entire statement should be in it word for word. I think she pointed out many things that many citizens have been talking about, and I think it's important to have the entire statement in the minutes.
So again, and I think we have said this before, the minutes are never a transcript. That is why we have Cat TV here. So the minutes reflect the conversation that was had and the action that was taken. The Cat TV is the verbatim, so if anyone needs that, they can always go to Cat TV, and it's usually linked to the minutes. So, so you can go on the website. So,
Okay. Page 10, line 321, where it says number 3, did the town accept the grant for 1.9 million with our share of 400,000? I was referring to the bike path and bridge behind Hannaford.
can you just say again what line?
Page 10, 321.
Oh, yes, and it didn't say what you were referring to. Yeah.
No, I just would like that to show in the minutes so people will know.
Nancy, did you get that?
Not really, because I just found it. What was that correction again?
Bike path and bridge behind Hannaford.
Okay.
On number 3, okay.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for catching that. I had to remember what you were talking about because it didn't flow. Okay, anything else on the minutes? Okay, back to the warrants.
Yeah, I'll pass, thank you.
Okay.
I
all right.
do.
Anything else?
Page 7, the last page. Down on the bottom. Ben High pre-development loan, $124,373.67. It says number 5, final payment. Is that towards the total of the $500,000 in ARPA towards pre-development
Yes, I believe so. That is the final payment.
for $500,000?
Yes.
And that came from,
That came from the ARPA funds.
but where are they?
It's a loan to Hale Resources or the Bennington LLC. It'll come back to the town at closing.
And we voted on that. And you voted, Nancy.
No, I realize that, but you had already agreed to put $500,000 towards pre-development. That was separate from...
That was separate. That was early on, yes.
But we voted on doing this
No, I
recently.
realize, I
Yeah.
thought this was something else. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anything else on the minutes or warrants? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the warrant, the consent agenda, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, all unanimous. All right, perfect. Okie dokie. We have a lot of people for public comment. Let's look at this. Bill Clark, let's start with you and holiday lights.
Hi, I'm Bill Clark, Bennington resident. I felt like I need to share some speaking this evening as my BBC, Better Bennington Corporation, is this what I'm talking about, my job real quick. I know I got 3 minutes, and I'm going to try and sum it up quick. Oh, yeah. Sorry, better? So I just wanted to share, I've had some people ask me about the lights, so it's not, I'm responsible for them, but it is a team effort. It's a group of people every year. I've been doing it since 2017. Normally it takes about 100 hours to get them ready. So I'm responsible to make sure they get fluffed, the lights get on, they get up into the street, Buildings and Grounds hangs them for me. So it is a team effort. It's not just me. I do oversee that process. With part of that process for the past 6 years, community-based program from the high school, the kids have been awesome. I get to mentor them at the same time. They have helped. This year they came out, really helped this year, so that 100 hours has been cut down to about 80 hours with their help. Still 100 hours, but 11 hours of them helping volunteering. So that's cut that down, and with Mark Sawyer with Buildings and Grounds, this year they went out and made sure all of the boxes were new and everything on the light poles to cut down the cost. And with that, what I mean is normally I would have to go out when on a rainy day after it dries, climb the poles, turn everything back on. So they've cut that cost and cut down the amount of hours I have to put on the street to turn them back on. So far, the other day with the rain, that seemed to help. They're still on. So I just wanted to share real quick that process with that. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Did we know we had an official wreath fluffer? Yes, I remember the fluffing days. Yes, it's fantastic. All right, Jason Fredrickson on exhibition.
And I just want to say, I will give anyone a 30-second warning when they get close to their 3 minutes.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you so much. So Jason Fredrickson, Bennington, Vermont, and tonight I was going to wear a Bennington Museum hat just because it's cool timing that the day after Thanksgiving we open our end of the year exhibit, which is really cool because every year we invite over 25 artists to present and put artworks up for bid so that it helps support the artist and the museum. So we're really excited. I had to make notes because it's so new that I can't memorize the titles of the exhibit yet. Uncanny Valley Magic Realism in Vermont. It's kind of a cool topic, and there's a lot of interesting artworks that I have no idea how to describe yet. So anyway, so with that, it opens on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and goes until the end of the calendar year. We have our annual Family Day, which is always great fun, where we get a couple hundred, or 300 is the top number I saw before, community members that come with their families to do shopping and the kids shopping. We are still taking donations for that, so if anybody has gently used items that a 5-year-old to 10-year-old would be like, yeah, that's a good item to buy for grandma or mom or dad, please stop by the front desk and I'll take your items for a donation. That would be great. Then we have our annual gala on Saturday, December 14th, which is great fun. And then even a New Year's Day celebration on December 31st, which we celebrate noon because not everybody can make midnight. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. All right, it's going to be a good night. I like the applause. And Jean, you very kindly reminded me that I didn't say, the public comment stuff. So public comment is a time for residents to have an opportunity to share information and make announcements that benefit the community at large. Topics should not be related to agenda items. If you want to speak on an agenda item, wait till that agenda item comes up and you'll have a chance to do that. Comments should be 3 minutes or less, which leads into the 30-second warning. And speakers are required to state their legal name and town of residence. Sharing comments, announcements, and concerns are encouraged rather than asking questions. Public comment is not a time for discussion. It is really a time for you to share information that you want to share. And if a topic, and if there is something quick that we can respond to, we will do that. Oh, the right packet has arrived. We will respond to that at the end of public comment. So when you finish your comment, please sit down. All right, so sorry about that. All right, let's see. Ben High Project, Susan Armstrong.
So you already know who I am. I've lived here for over 30 years, and I just want to support this project. I think it's a wonderful use of the space. I've been hearing about it for many years, and I've kept asking, how can I sign up for one of those apartments? And nobody knew anything. But I would really like to live there someday. So I hope it goes through. We really need housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let's see, Ned Perkins, Reservoir? That might not be what it says.
That's not what it says.
What does it say?
I am Ned Perkins, Bennington, Vermont, and it says reserves.
Reserves, okay, thank you.
At your last meeting, the select board voted to create a reserve fund for the traffic calming issue. I just wanted to caution you about creating reserve funds. Per state law, creating a reserve fund requires a vote at a town meeting, and once funds are placed into a reserve fund, they can't be used for any other purposes. Now, the town has lots of reserves right now. They have at least 39 reserves with over $5 million in them. I'm not sure if all of these are really true reserve funds created at a town meeting. Some of them, I think, may be just designated funds which were set aside from the general fund. But in any case, you know, we've got lots of small amounts. There's almost half the funds have less than $5,000 in them. So you get funds like the Chamber Memorial Park Fund that has $100 in it, or the Appalachian Trail Fund has $115 in it. And one of the problems with reserve funds is that they don't always get spent the way they should be spent. So last year, we had $33,000 in the fireworks fund, and we spent $14,000 on fireworks, but we spent it through a budgeted line item. We never touched the reserve. The same thing with the Bennington and Bloom. We had $15,000 there, but it didn't get spent out of the reserves. It got spent from the budgeted line items. And the other risk is you can put too much away. So we've got $1 million in reserve for reappraisal. And we know we're going to have to do a reappraisal. And it's going to be expensive, but it may not be that expensive. I think it's going to be more like $750,000. So anyway, you're tying up money. And my point is that reserves tie up funds in ways that, and sometimes you can't predict how if they're done, if it's not handled correctly. So if you want to plan to spend money, just budget it. If you want to have money for the traffic calming, budget some money for it. But I think, you know, creating a reserve is just a sticky wicket. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ned. All right, let's see. Chad Gordon, gratitude.
Good evening, Chad Gordon, Bennington. With the 3-minute policy, I decided to write things down and read the statement to you. So November is National Gratitude Month, a time to reflect and show thanks. So I'd just like to share a couple of things tonight with all of you. So I am thankful for where I live. I may be biased as the football coach at Mount Anthony, but there is no place better to be on a Friday night in the fall than under the lights of Spinelli Field in Bennington. I'd like to express my gratitude to our fans, the Bennington community, for its support for our program and the players. Many individuals, organizations, and businesses have gone above and beyond this season, so thank you. Secondly, I'm grateful for the Hales and Hale Resource Incorporated. The Bennington High project is a complicated but much needed project for our community, and I'm grateful for the efforts and energy to complete this project. Working with multiple funding sources from local, state, and federal sources take time, and I ask the community to be patient. One resource that a lot of my students use is Google, so I am grateful for Google. For those of you with short memory, I ask that you Google the Vermont Digger article about 219 Pleasant Street and the work that the Hales did there. From my time on the board, I was grateful that we approved the first ever public-private partnership in Vermont history. The Hales were able to improve and add 11 housing units in a historic property in downtown. They were successful with this project, and they will be successful with the Ben High project. When there is a ribbon-cutting ceremony at Ben High, I hope those most outspoken against this project will be there and admit they were mistaken when they attacked this project. Lastly, as a math teacher, I'm grateful for job security. Watching several meetings and reading comments on Facebook, I see firsthand many struggle with math. I get it. Math is hard. So I offer this, and I'll gladly sit with any board member or community members who need help realizing that growing the grand list is a great way to help reduce property taxes in Bennington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. I'm thankful for Google, too, let me tell you.
And Chad, we do miss your math skills on the board. Let's see. Steve Tatro, Ben High. It's a theme.
Good evening. I'm Steve Tatro. I live in Bennington, and I'm here. I'd like to thank the board for your time and dedication here. I'm also here to encourage to preserve the funds, the ARPA funds for the Ben High project. I also feel that would be a great project for this town. And I'd also like to thank John Hale for taking on this project. That building sat for so long, and obviously no one else wanted to do it. So, and the town of Bennington. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Kelly Carroll and Kate Koss. Oh dear. Public Forum. Let's see, Barb.
I'm Kate Koss, Bennington.
Hi, I'm Kelly Carroll from Bennington, and Kate and I are both on Bennington's Community Policing Advisory Review Board. I'm the chair, and she's the vice chair. So lately, there's been a lot of conversation regarding crime, catch and release, and vigilantism. So this even came up during your listening session last month. We are here to announce that CPARB will be hosting a public safety educational forum on Wednesday, February 26, 2025 at the Mount Anthony Union High School in the auditorium from 6 to 8 p.m. The overall purpose of this forum is to focus on safe and legal crime prevention by bringing together key stakeholders such as the Bennington Police Department, the Vermont State Police, the Bennington State's Attorney's Office, United Counseling Service, and the town, to educate and inform the community on current best practices, opportunities, and challenges when it comes to safe and legal crime prevention and law enforcement. And most importantly, to listen to the community's concerns and ideas on crime prevention and law enforcement, especially in the context of community policing. So as you get your new 2025 calendars, make sure you save that date, Wednesday, February 26th, 6 to 8 p.m., Mount Anthony Union High School Auditorium. We'll have more information after our December 19th CPARB meeting. So thank you very much. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Kelly and Kate. Super. All right. Let's see. Bridget Elder, various, and thank you. Or various, thank you.
I'll have to adjust the mic. Vertically challenged. I wanted to say I'm really thankful for every time I go to the town offices, people are unfailingly helpful and polite. And it's, whether it's if I can plant a tree in a certain place, a dog license, paying my bill, questions about real estate, people have been really helpful in the town offices, and I wanted to thank them. It's very welcoming, inviting, and very satisfying to go and do what you need to do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can we have National Gratitude Month every month?
This is incredible.
This is incredible. Wow. Okay, let's see. Before the last person who actually is a select board member comes up for public comment, is there anyone else in the public who would like to share anything with us tonight? No? Then Clark, you've signed up as a select board member to speak a public comment.
Some people already spoken on the point, but thank you, folks.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
For your
Okay.
gratitude. See, I put thank you under, didn't I?
That's perfect. Okay.
I wanted to express our gratitude.
Thank you.
So
This was the
other
most
people stealing my thunder.
fun public comment ever. It's lovely. Okay. So next up is Charter Review Committee presentation. And this amazing Charter Review group has finished their work, which we only gave them 4 months to do, ahead of time, which is pretty amazing. And the report is now out. And if you've had a chance to look at it, you will agree that it is thorough, well-written, just absolutely amazing. So what we're getting tonight, Jackie is here to talk with us, and my understanding is what we are doing tonight is you are sharing information with us. We're not discussing this tonight. We'll set the hearing dates tonight. We'll warn the hearing and have discussion then or at a later date. But right now, you're introducing the Charter Review Committee's results or findings to us. Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Matz. I've had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the town's Charter Review Committee for the past 4 months or so. I'd like to introduce the other members of the committee that are in the audience. If you can maybe stand, raise your hands. We have Michael Moscato front, Drew Lurman, Rebecca Sentner, and Carolyn Gilbert. And also on the committee was Colleen McQuaid, who I don't see in the audience tonight. They've all worked extremely hard. They've been super dedicated to this process. So if we're not out of applause, let's give a little more.
I know.
So a little background, our committee has been meeting for the past 13 weeks. We met 13 times, once a week. In that time, we've interviewed 26 stakeholders. We've received 25 public comments. We've held 2 public forums. In all, members of the committee collectively have dedicated over 500 hours of work to this process. Out of that work has come 6 recommendations that we'll talk about tonight. Before we get to that, I wanted to share a little about one of the guiding principles that we've kept at the sort of the center of our work, which is in many ways, it's the collective will of the town as expressed through the election process, through voting, that's really guided us, right? And so by giving primacy to the will of the voters there, we've avoided making certain recommendations that we felt came into conflict with that ideal, right? So for example, when we talk about term limits, right? By enforcing term limits, we remove the will of the voters to have their ideas expressed, and so we haven't made that kind of a recommendation. Similarly, some of the recommendations we've made, instead of vesting a certain power or a certain authority with another board or committee with the town, we've chosen to vest those powers with the select board because currently we think the select board is the best body to exercise those powers responsibly. So, and you'll see this as we go through the recommendations. So I'll start off with the governance piece of it. On our committee, we had a governance research group. This was to investigate the charge of investigating duties, responsibilities, and terms of the select board and town manager. We had 8 public comments come in on this. The recommendation that we're putting forward here did come sort of out of those comments. 5 of those comments fell into this category of ideas that would like restrict the authority of the select board or would mandate the select board to behave in a certain way, to take certain actions. And I think they came from a good place, but a lot of them appeared to be in response to current conditions, right? And so thinking forward, the charter being a long-lived document, we wanted to be careful that we weren't forcing the select board's hand 5 years down the road when conditions might have changed, right? So we've neglected to move forward with some of those recommendations. One of the public comments came in about the charter review process itself. It didn't appear there was a specific recommendation in that public comment. 2 of them came in on term limits, and like I've just explained how our committee felt about that, but the legislature in Vermont has also taken a pretty well-known stance on that they view sort of the term that someone's elected for as the term limit, and so they've consistently rejected those charter amendments if they've gotten to the legislature. So the one recommendation we're making here is to add the phrase "unless modified by contract" to the section of the charter that deals with dismissing the town manager. So currently, dismissal of the town manager can be done without cause on 90 days' notice. We didn't want to remove that provision from the town charter. That's actually kind of a unique provision in Bennington's town charter. A lot of towns don't have that in their charter. So when we looked at that, we thought that must be there for a reason, right? Let's leave it alone. We don't want to take that away. But we think there are a lot of benefits to be had in the ability to offer a contract when hiring a new town manager. For example, that could make an offer of employment more attractive without necessarily having to increase the salary that you're offering, right? It also allows for better definition of expectations on both sides, on the side of the town and on the side of the town manager. Also, when the contract expires, it can simply not be renewed, right? And I think it's important to mention that offering a contract doesn't mean necessarily that the select board would be removing the at-will provision. It could guarantee the contract for a certain period of time, but the contract doesn't have to speak to that issue. We spoke to town council and were advised that this doesn't really change what the select board is allowed to do. Town council believes the select board has this authority already, but we just wanted to clarify and make it well known that this was an option that could be exercised. Our second recommendation concerns the Community Policing Advisory Review Board. This was a bit of a quagmire for us to investigate. The main issue that we uncovered here is the lack of a clear mandate regarding the outcome of that board's work. Conversations with the board showed kind of a lack of clarity, and the lack of clarity that they'd been given through the resolution resulted in sort of a disorganized board that had made little progress towards a lot of the goals that were stated in that resolution. And there seemed to be a lack of motivation to really address some of those concerns and those issues. Worst, when we approached that board and had a conversation with them, there was a sense of hostility that we got from them around the idea of discussing any charter amendments or any other reforms to improve the outcomes of that board. So I think a lot of this stems from concerns over a combative relationship, potentially with the Bennington Police Department. But I think the Charter Review Committee was really focused on finding a way to allow for a collegial, collaborative process there. Through our conversations also, we found that some of the answers that we got from the Bennington Police Department versus the answers that we got from the members of the board were in conflict. They didn't always agree, right? And so this again just shows that lack of clarity and the confusion that sort of surrounds this process a little bit right now. We did some research into other community advisory boards across the state and across the country. And what we found is that a lot of them, the success of those boards really depends on all of the community partners really being committed to the success of that process. So this includes the Select Board, obviously the Community Advisory Board, the Bennington Police Department, town employees if they're involved in that process, and other community partners. These initiatives are really hard to get right. Many communities really struggle at first to strike that balance and land in that kind of constructive feedback zone without going too far either towards condemnation or obstruction, right? So like really sort of narrowing that in seems to be a big key here. So we went back, we looked at the recommendations from around 2022 that came out of the Safety and Equity Task Force. And at the time, those recommendations couldn't actually be implemented in the current Community Advisory Board that we have. One of the big reasons for that was because there was a lack of a supporting statute. And so the recommendation that we're putting forward today provides that statute support so that the recommendations from the original Safety and Equity Task Force can be implemented. So this would allow for an evidence-based review of any alleged misconduct. The BPD, the Bennington Police Department, would retain complete ownership of any disciplinary process, which I think is important. That was a real sticking point for our committee. And finally, our recommendation specifically does not name or enshrine the Community Policing Advisory Review Board in the town charter. Like I said at the beginning, this is something that we would recommend be the authority be given to the Select Board to exercise. And our committee really has no opinion on who receives this power, when it's granted, how it's sort of guided. So we're trusting the Select Board to make those calls. There's some additional recommendations in our report concerning the Community Advisory Board. They're really meant to help guide the Select Board. We know that that the resolution that created the Community Advisory Board is sort of up for reevaluation. That has to be done every 3 years. And so we're kind of getting right to that point in the process where that has to be done anyway. So we've offered a number of sort of guiding questions to help narrow in and define a well-resourced board with specific measurable goals and responsive organizational partners. Our next two recommendations concern voting in town. We had a lot of public feedback from this, and that was great. We really appreciate it. Specifically, we received 4 public comments in favor of enfranchising more populations. We received 5 opposed to that. I'll get back to that in just a moment. We received 1 public comment that advocated for non-resident taxpayers to have some access to the ballot. We didn't really have time to look into that. There's some precedent in other states. So this would be somebody, for example, who owns property in Bennington, but does not consider Bennington their home, right? And so highlight that for you. The other one, which I'll talk about at the end, concerned all-mail voting. So the 2 populations that we were looking at here were 16 and 17-year-olds and non-citizen residents. So that's legal residents of Bennington, Vermont, who are not U.S. citizens. So there's a lot of overlap in what we considered looking at these 2 populations, but we think that they should be placed on the ballot as 2 separate ballot items. So one for 16 and 17-year-old voters, and then a second ballot item for non-citizen residents. When we looked at this, we started by confirming that the town has legal authority to do this. It does. That's well documented. When we were looking at that, one of the things we came across were a handful of lawsuits that have come up in Vermont, other towns in Vermont that have passed similar provisions, and there have been a few lawsuits. One of them is still pending. 3 of them have been dismissed. And I'm not a lawyer, but this is like a little bit of legal language I learned recently. When a lawsuit's dismissed, that's a specific way of ruling against a case. And it means that the defending lawyer, right, the towns in this case, didn't have to put forth a lot of evidence. They didn't have to make their case. They just said, we can clearly do this, judge. Can you please just dismiss the case? And the judge looked at it and said, you're right, there's no need for us to hear this case, we'll go ahead and dismiss this. So we saw that as a good sign because that limits the amount of legal exposure that the town might have if this passes. The second big thing that our committee guided these decisions based off of was the state election management system. So I have acronyms written down here. There's an update coming to the state election management system that will make it possible for these new populations, 16 and 17-year-olds, non-citizen residents, to be included in that state election management system. So that means that if they are allowed to vote, then they'll be subject to the same registration process, the same verification process. Their experience accessing the ballot will be exactly the same as anyone else in town that currently votes, right? That was really important to us. We didn't want to have to see a separate process or things handled a little differently for some populations. The third thing that we really looked closely at was what this would cost, right? So, in Bennington, our school district is bigger than the town of Bennington, right? So these new populations, they would not be eligible to vote in school elections. They would only be allowed to vote in municipal elections. Currently, when we print ballots, all of the ballot items for the municipal elections and the school board elections get printed on the same ballot. In order to accommodate new populations, we'd have to split those ballots. So we'd have to print twice as many ballots so that when somebody showed up to the polls, we could give them just the set of ballot items that they were eligible to vote on. Estimating costs is always tricky, but the guidance that we got is that this would cost about $1,700 a year. Seems like a small amount when we're talking about $500,000 Arbor deals. We also looked at turnout. Would there be a lot of new people coming to vote? Would there be a very small number of people? Would they hold different opinions to a lot of Bennington residents? Like, would they change sort of the overall opinion of the electorate? And while these issues did come up, we really felt that these were inappropriate things to use to decide whether someone should vote, right? Whether or not someone does vote shouldn't determine whether they can vote, and how someone votes shouldn't determine whether they can vote, right? So we really, these concerns came up, but we didn't think that they were relevant to what we were looking at. Another one that came up was undocumented residents, right? So immigrants that are undocumented for whatever reason. What we found in talking to other jurisdictions that have approved non-citizen residents to vote is that folks that are undocumented really don't try to go and access that ballot. They're not keen on showing up and putting their name down on a piece of paper and starting to create that paper trail. So that was not something that we found was a legitimate concern. With 16 and 17-year-olds, we additionally looked at their sort of critical thinking skills, their ability to make informed decisions and to avoid bias. We looked really closely at this. We had actually a really helpful public comment that came in and pointed us to a research study, a scientific article from, I think it was the National Library of Medicine, and that really showed that kids actually, 16 and 17-year-olds, are actually less susceptible to some of these kinds of bias than adults are, right? Adults with all the experience they have, they tend to just think they know, right? Whereas 16 and 17-year-olds, since they kind of have fresh eyes on the world, they go, let me look into this first, right? And so that was a really helpful thing for us to understand about 16 and 17-year-olds. The last piece that sort of hangs in the air for us a little bit, I think it is a consideration, but we didn't feel it was a strong enough consideration to not move forward here was the possibility that a 16 or 17-year-old person in Bennington, if given eligibility to vote, could also run for any office that they can vote for. So if they can vote for a select person, they can run and be a select person if they're voted in. Right? So there are some issues around here that we didn't have a chance to explore fully regarding select boards, signing contracts, having minors involved in that process. But, you know, I think it's unlikely that a 16 or 17-year-old would be elected to the select board, although I think it would be very cool in some ways. But so I want to highlight that for you. The last piece on voting that I said I'd come back to is this idea of all-mail voting. An idea came in over public comment to have our municipal elections similar to how national elections are conducted now, where everybody gets a ballot mailed to their house. Right? On its surface, this would allow more people access to the ballot. What we learned in Bennington, again, going back to the idea that our school district and our municipal district are sort of not in sync with each other, is that if we were to do that, what would happen is folks at their house would get a ballot with the municipal elections on it in March, but they would not get the school elections on that same ballot. And then they would just have to know that they either have to request a school ballot or show up in person to vote on those races. And so that really concerned us. We thought that that would introduce potentially a lot of confusion and people would miss a lot of ballot items. So for that reason, we didn't move forward with that recommendation. Our last set of recommendations concerns properties in town. We were asked to look at options to address the number of long-term vacant properties that we have in town. And I think the folks on our committee, we really believe that affordable, quality housing is really essential for a healthy economy. A vibrant downtown is really the driver of a healthy economy here. So we split this up. We looked at sort of two different kinds of properties. We looked at commercial properties and at residential properties. Right now, the town has a list of vacant properties. We found that that list is not complete, but right now there are 21 vacant commercial properties and 9 vacant residential properties in town. On the residential side, we know that statewide there's a housing shortage, right? This might explain why there's fewer residential vacant properties, right? So across the state, the vacancy rates are just too low, right? A healthy level is about 5%. Statewide, we're at 3.4% or so. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of the big ones right now is that there's a contractor shortage. Another one that we looked at is the impact of short-term rentals, right? How they can impact the housing market. They take a property off the market, they turn it into an investment property. It's then no longer available as a long-term rental. On the commercial side, what we found was of those 21 vacant commercial spaces in our downtown, 43% of them are owned by 3 companies. Again, there's many reasons for this. Sometimes the owners are just absent or negligent. In some cases, the owner might be deceased and it's unclear who's really responsible for that property. Sometimes there's financial obstacles or other market obstacles towards renting those properties. And then the one that really concerned us actually was that there was a number of tax incentives at the federal level that we think some of these property owners are taking advantage of. By leaving their property vacant, then they can claim a loss on their federal taxes, and they use that to offset gains that they've had somewhere else. So they pay less taxes, right? And so what we found here is we really have a case of people enriching themselves at the expense of our town's vitality. So some of the challenges here to address this concern the municipal loan subordination. So when the town puts a lien on a property, there's usually already a lien, a mortgage holder, if you will. And so if the town forecloses to collect on that, then the mortgage holder will also foreclose, and then they have supremacy on that lien, and the town gets nothing. There's also some environmental liability issues at stake here, where if the town goes in to try to restore or clean up something on a property that's causing harm to surrounding areas, the town becomes responsible then for any further cleanup that's needed there. And then also, we just find generally that there's limited enforcement resources for the town, right? We all have to, use our resources carefully, but there's more vacant properties right now in town, more blighted properties than the town has enough staff to really address adequately. So, those are the challenges. Solutions, there's a bunch of options here. Some of them come in the form of ordinances, like Article 30 that the town has. Some of them can come at the state level through state statutes. Grants and public-private partnerships can be a good piece of that solution. In the charter, there's two pieces that we want to move forward. The first is that we want to put forward a recommendation to shift the lien priority for all property code violations. So right now, water and sewer liens that go on a property, they do take priority over a mortgage holder, right? And there's a few other classes that are treated like that, but currently property code violations don't get that same treatment, and we think they should. The second is to allow for a local options tax specifically targeting non-owner occupied short-term rentals. We think there's a valuable place in our community for short-term rentals, an in-law suite that's in somebody's backyard, right? They contribute to the local economy, they help homeowners sort of pay their bills, there's a lot of benefits there. But the properties that an investment firm comes in and buys up and then just rents out and just takes off the market, they're really impacting our ability to just house the people that we have in town. And we need housing for the people in town. So this is one way that we could help offset the financial incentive of some of these companies to purchase these properties and remove them from our housing supply. In addition to that, we're recommending that the Select Board create a short-term rental registry. It's a little unclear how many of these properties are in town currently, so it'd be helpful to collect data on some of those trends, make sure that they're in compliance with zoning regulations and other laws. It would give citizens a place to report any issues that they have with these properties. There's precedent for this, specifically in Winooski and Killington have both adopted really strong short-term rental registries that could serve as a model for what Bennington could do moving forward. The second suggestion, or the next suggestion, not charter related, is to consider adding some vacancy fees to Article 30. Again, there's precedent for this in East Hampton. This would be an annual fee that vacant property owners pay on a yearly basis. It could increase over time. And it's another financial deterrent to help make sure that these properties are being used in the most productive way possible. And then finally, we encourage the town to properly resource Article 30 enforcement so that when these issues do come up, as they have, there's enough folks to go around and document it and issue the fines and that kind of thing. So those are the 6 recommendations that we're putting forward today. I'm really proud of the work that this committee has done. Couple additional comments that have come in on the lighting. Someone had an issue with some lighting in their backyard. There was a concern over the water bill, and there was a concern that came in regarding the impact of downtown sort of storefront churches on our education system. So those are in the report. We encourage you to look at those. We did not think that those were charter issues, but those are concerns that citizens came to us with. Moving forward, we think that next time it would be really great for the Select Board to set some clear expectations for the Charter Review Committee in terms of the commitment involved. We're recommending that the next Charter Review Committee have a May through October timeframe that would allow for a little more flexibility to space out public forums. We heard from the public that they weren't always able to attend, and sort of it was awkward where those fell within our process. So we think a May through October timeframe would work well there. I'd like to thank all the people that supported us in the work that we've been doing, particularly Stu Hurd and Dan Monks, who were great as our liaisons and a fantastic resource for us to have available at our meetings. Beth Antonioni and Jonas Spivak, who were just absolutely wonderful with us through the whole process. Cat TV, who filmed all of our meetings. They were wonderful. Town Council Merrill Bent, of course, our committee, and all of the people from the public that came and spoke to us, that stopped us in the grocery store. It was really, really wonderful. I think I've said it before, but that was the highlight of this process for me. One last note before I take questions is I think all of the members of my committee will agree with me when I say that I hope that this committee's values of respecting all people and being inclusive of diverse opinions will continue to characterize this process as it moves to the next stage. That the spirit that we've brought to this work will be carried forward as we hand it off to the Select Board. In the eternal sentiment of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Thank you. I'll take some questions.
That was a great overview. All right, so what we want to do at this point is really move into clarifying questions. So, because this is all new to us and we'll need time to sort of digest it. We'll start with the Select Board. Anyone on the board have any clarifying questions? Yes, Tom?
In your recommendation regarding the options tax, you aren't actually recommending an options tax. You're recommending that the town be able to vote whether or not they want to have the option tax. Is that
That's right.
the case? Okay.
So right now, the Select Board has the authority to recommend to the voters 4 types of options taxes: a rooms tax, a meals tax, a tax on alcoholic beverages, and a tax on sales. So the role of the Select Board is to recommend those option taxes to the voters. The voters would have to approve them. When we looked at this, it became clear to us that short-term rentals would fall under the rooms tax, but in order for the Select Board to target short-term rentals specifically, that would have to be listed as a separate category in the charter. So we think that the Select Board should have the ability to really target that measure at those properties. So the Select Board would recommend that tax to the voters first, then the voters would have to approve it.
Any questions? Yes, Nancy.
Jackie, in the final report, I saw that your committee met with the Brattleboro Charter Committee. And unless I overlooked it, I didn't see the reasons in here why Governor Phil Scott vetoed the 16 and 17-year-olds voting in 2022, didn't sign it in 2023, and the legislature overruled him. Is there any information, did I miss it in here, or, because I think it's critical for the public to understand his reasoning why he said no.
Sure. The one thing I can clarify there is that we did not specifically meet with the Brattleboro Charter Review Committee. We attended a meeting of that committee. We attended that meeting because they were discussing adding non-citizen resident voting to their town charter. They already have 16 and 17-year-old voting approved, as you just mentioned. In terms of why the governor rejected that proposal, I think I'm not perfectly sure, but I think often the first time that a proposal like this comes across through the legislature and the governor's desk, there's some caution that's exercised there. Brattleboro was the first town that put forward this measure. They've implemented it now. There's been no major issues, so if ours reaches the governor's desk, it may well be a different story.
But I think at some point we need to make the public aware of it because the legislature had passed a law where 18-year-olds weren't going to be charged as adults for certain crimes. You had to be 18 to be married. That was another law. And he was concerned to say 18, you can't be held accountable, or you have to be 18 to be married, and he was concerned saying 16 and 17-year-olds would be mature enough to vote and to serve on select boards. So I think it's important the public understands we have different laws in the state that are kind of contradicting each other.
And so
I think that's
we will
important
have,
too. Thank you.
And we will have a chance to, we'll set the hearing dates, and those will be additional times to actually get into some of the meat of why to certain things. What we're trying to do right now is just clarify anything in here so we, so that we know what we can discuss, what we should be discussing.
But I hope for the time they've put into it, we can talk about this at a meeting before we get it, like next month even.
Well, at the hearings, yeah. So for sure at the hearings, and we'll see, the hearings are a time for the public to come together, both to share their thoughts and also for all of us to know what we're voting on. So when we go in the ballot box, you have the questions there and you vote. So you want to be an informed voter. So that is why 2 public hearings are required. And we will probably have additional conversation before that. But today, we're not having that conversation. All we're doing today is clarifying that we all know what we're talking about.
Can the public ask a question?
Not yet, but you will. Other questions from select board members?
Yes, I do.
She's not finished.
Oh, okay, Nancy, and I also have a question.
I talked to Stu beforehand. It's difficult without seeing the actual language as it would appear in the charter, just going by the titles, because when I'm looking at what's being proposed for the CPARP, I have to say I'm shocked, but
Again, this is not personal opinion now.
But that's why it's hard to know if you're really proposing all this to go on the charter or if it's a suggestion.
The abstract of recommendations, I sent everybody Friday night, Saturday morning, this whole document.
Yeah.
So on page 5, the abstract of recommendations are there. So that's the meat of what's being recommended. There are many things that are suggested that might be in ordinances, or we might tighten the ship in other ways, but the abstract of recommendations is on page 5. Okay? So again, let's just make sure today that we know what we're talking about.
But that's why I hope we don't wait until a public hearing in January. I hope we have it all clarified sooner.
Well, so I think when we get, that's a different discussion, and we will have it. We will have it. But right now,
and if I may,
let's work with Jackie.
The time frame of our process didn't allow for us to submit our sort of that abstract of recommendations to town council and get specific language back from council. Council, I think, is returning sometime next week. So usually it's council that drafts the specific language, so we're still waiting for some of that. It'll certainly be available as soon as we hear back from council.
Great. That's very helpful. Does that answer your questions?
No, I just would like to see it all condensed, so, sooner rather than later. And I know you've been busy. I'm not saying we should have had it tonight, but I hope we don't wait until the first public hearing in January.
Me too.
Clark?
Hi, Jackie. Yeah, thanks for all of your work, and Mike and everyone's work. I greatly appreciate it. One of the things that I'm thinking ran by, you discussed some of this commercial properties owned by out-of-town entities that are just basically using it as a tax break by allowing it to be vacant. One of the concerns or questions I have is within town governance. Is there some mechanism, you consider the idea of us looking at some of this property, and as we know, as the property declines, it decreases in value, that we not permit that property to basically lower its footprint on our tax base? That if, $1 million piece of property is allowed to just sit there and deteriorate, again, this is just me, uneducated Clark, saying, it's a free ride for us to let this person's property deteriorate and narrow our tax base while they turn around and go to the feds and make money off it. I'm wondering if somehow we've considered a way to stabilize that to prevent that property from becoming a narrower footprint on our tax base.
I think that's an interesting suggestion. I think personally, I'd certainly be in favor of anything that can help combat this issue. That specific strategy is not one that we've looked at. That section's pretty bulky. There's a bunch of suggestions in there other than charter ones. But I think any strategy that could help in that area should be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question about the Advisory Review Board? In your recommendation, you use the language Civilian Oversight Board, which this Select Board and the task force chose not to use. Mm-hmm. Are you using those interchangeably, or are you suggesting a Civilian Oversight Board?
We're not suggesting any specific kind of board. We, I think, have found throughout our research that those terms are often used interchangeably, and sort of the boundaries between what's an advisory and what's review and what's oversight get a little hazy. So that might have just been a imprecise use of language.
Okay, that's good to know. They're actually very different, and during the year and a half that the Select Board was heavily involved in that there was a lot of discussion about what those terms meant. So okay, so you were not suggesting a shift, you're just using the language. No. Okay, all right. Yeah, Clark.
Yeah. Again, one of my concerns parallels Ms. Jenkins' concern. One of the big points of contention that came up was review organizations versus advocacy organization. Mm-hmm. And some of the things I read and heard, that those lines are being blurred. And as she again mentioned, words matter. We need to be quite clear in our descriptions. And I think having sat in the room when the title was being hashed out, we were quite clear about review. There was no intent or discussion of oversight or involvement in any sort of internal workings, so to speak, of the PD. So I think the C part of it needs to be quite clear to stick with the title, what those words mean, coupled with the intent that is not meant to be an advocacy organization. It was meant to, in fact, review issues around community policing, and as issues were brought through the complaint process or whatever, that those issues, when they were addressed, that would be reviewed by this organization. That I think is very important. We understand the origins and that we stick to the correct definitions as connected to this.
And so for the purposes now, I think it's just that you were not suggesting a change, and we do know we have CPARB coming before us at the next meeting with some recommendations, and it does seem like, I think, Jean, Tom, and I were on the board, and Clark was on the task force, and there was very clear intention of what we wanted the review board to be able to do, and it sounds like we need to tighten the ship a little bit to make this, to make that a possibility. But I think for the purposes of this, we just want to make sure we know your intent.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions from the select board? Yes, Tom.
You mentioned that you're going to be getting advice on specific language from council. Will your committee be reviewing that language to ensure that what it says is what you meant?
I don't think that was on our roadmap.
But we would certainly invite you to do that if you would like to, right? Because I think the timing, so I'm thinking the timing on that would be early January that we would have that language, is that?
I'm hopeful that you will have that language early December.
Good. Oh, okay, even better.
The warning must be signed by the board, so you must
We're going to do the warnings tonight. The warning must have that specific language. Dadgummit, okay,
board,
yep.
Just to clarify, the board must make a decision about what goes on the ballot, you must approve the wording of the ballot articles.
Yeah.
And that all must be signed no later than December 27th, because you need a 30-day notice before the first hearing.
So, but we can change, my understanding was, and we're getting off this, I'm sorry, Jackie, but my understanding was we could change language after the first hearing.
That's correct.
So how can we, I thought we were warning the public hearings, not the ballot. I'm talking about warning the public hearings.
No, you have to warn the public, the hearing notice will include the ballot questions.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
After the first hearing, you can change the wording on the ballots, or you can eliminate a ballot question. It's your decision. But you have to make that decision at least 10 days, to give you enough 10 days before the next hearing.
Yeah, but we can't warn the public hearings until we have the ballot.
You have to have the ballot questions
all right, got
available to you.
Okay, all right, we won't do that tonight then. Okay.
Well, I'll say I'd be happy to review the language when it comes in.
Okay.
I think probably most of the other members of
I
the
saw a
committee
couple
would be as well.
I saw a couple heads nodding. Yeah.
See something.
So, all right. So, other questions from us? No. All right. So, public. Anyone like to speak to this? Debbie. Please state your name and town of residence.
Debbie Matt, Bennington. You mentioned a study you looked at about 16 and 17-year-olds.
Yes.
How old was that study?
I don't know off the top of my head. So the study came to our attention through a public comment, and then based on that comment, we went and looked at that specific study.
It's in here, though, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for it. I don't remember.
I can give you an answer in 1 second.
Oh, it's in the back.
Oh, it's in the comments.
It's in the public comment section, right? It doesn't have the, it has the site, the citation is in here, Debbie, but it doesn't look like the date.
I have wireless right here.
It's on
It's
page
the 21st
30.
century.
It's on page 30.
It was from 2017. If you're interested, the title of the article is Aging and Decision-Making, a Conceptual Framework for Future Research by Karina E. Lockenhoff.
Kelly and then Maria.
Hi, Kelly Carroll, Bennington. 2 quick points. First, on the voting. Nancy, you are absolutely right. 16 and 17-year-olds, Governor Scott did veto that. I also would like to know specifically why. I know that the supermajority approved that. I just do not think if we are going to allow our young people to get away with murder up to age 23, that we should be allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. I think voting is a privilege, and it should be treated as such. And then just a point of clarification on CPARB. I just want to make sure that everybody knows, and I don't want it to get confused with everything, but CPARB does not have an adversarial relationship with the Bennington Police Department. We started off a little bit bumpy because of some misquoting in the media, and I just want to make sure that that is clarified today. As a matter of fact, we get criticized for collaborating too much, and we are definitely not oversight. There is a significant difference between advisory, review, and oversight, and I thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yes, there is not an adversarial relationship.
I agree, and if I gave that
I think
impression, I apologize. I do not believe there's an adversarial relationship at all.
Jackie, the amount of work that you guys have done, you have gotten so many things right. Do not worry. We will figure out how to get the governor's comments on. I'm looking at you, Stu. Staff will figure out how to get. Yeah, there's some. I'm sure there's a statement, so we'll get that information. Maria.
I'm Maria Corrales, resident of Bennington, Vermont. So I'm hoping you can clarify something for me. You said you were going to keep the two votes separate, 16 and 17-year-olds, and legal residents that are not
U.S. citizens.
That are not U.S. citizens. So let's say I choose 16 and 17-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include the legal residents that are non-resident? That are not legal?
No. So
because that's really vague. 16 and 17-year-olds means everyone, right?
She's about to answer your question, Maria.
I think, again, this is a point where the language that comes on the ballot will be a little more clarified. Our committee understood when we were looking at 16 and 17-year-old residents, we were looking at 16 and 17-year-old American citizens who live in Bennington, Vermont.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because there's two. You separated out those questions.
Yes.
So that's yeah. Other questions? So we're looking at clarifying. Yes, Michael McDonough.
I'm a little stiff. I spent the day putting up Christmas decorations in the park.
But you didn't have to fluff the wreaths.
I am Michael McDonough, and I am a resident of Bennington. I want to echo the comments from the board with their congratulations, if you will, or satisfaction, if you will, with the professionalism and the thoroughness that Jackie and the committee have put forth. There are a lot of weighty and impactful subjects in that report. And that leads me to a comment. And there was discussion, and presumably we have developed this effort in the context of our voting process. And what strikes me is that due to the weight and impactness of the issues that are being put before the board and the community, as has been evidenced by some of the comments this evening, that I wonder if we need to be totally locked into March on making decisions that are so important to the community, and so many of them in the same time frame. So I would make a recommendation that the board consider the possibility that there are perhaps certain recommendations that can be acted upon and can be placed on the March ballot, but there may be others that might require more research, more discussion on the part of the board and the community before we bring them forward, either in a special election, which I know is not a popular nor a very effective way of making decisions in the community. But on the other hand, these are new ideas that are just in many instances being placed before the community now, and I don't think there would be an error or a missed opportunity if we decided this took 15 months as opposed to 3 months. And so I just ask the board to give that some consideration. And again, my thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
Please, Mike.
Michael Moscato, proud resident of Bennington and proud member of the Charter Committee. One word that we heard discussed a lot in public comment that has come up time and time again regarding the voting is the word privilege. So I want to address that. Because I think to a person, everyone on the Charter Committee also believes that voting and being an American is a privilege. When we talk about privilege and when we talk about Governor Scott and his decision, the decision of this Charter Committee to put forth these recommendations to the people of the town of Bennington kept that privilege in mind at all times. The privilege is the right to vote as a citizen, as a resident of Bennington. Governor Scott making a decision based off of politics, political climate, re-election, personal preference, takes away our privilege as a resident of Bennington. We made no decision on these particular issues. It is our belief that it is the right of every single Bennington resident to have your voice, your values, and your vote heard by the town. And it is with that thought and with the word privilege in mind at all times that these issues were proposed to you as a select board. And I want everybody to understand that these were the issues that were presented to the Charter Committee by the town of Bennington, by the select board. And that is what we considered in all of our decisions. So just lastly, before I get my 30-second warning, we agree. It is a privilege. And we want every single person in Bennington to have an opportunity for that privilege. And with these specific issues, federal law allows us as citizens, Bennington residents, to make our town, our elections, how we see them. State law allows us as residents to determine who participates regarding non-citizens in our elections. So our committee saw federal law, we saw state law, and ultimately we felt that we have the protection to allow the residents of Bennington to answer that question individually at the voter polls. So show up on Election Day and have your voices heard, regardless of what side of that vote you have. We wanted you to have the privilege as a Bennington resident to make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Anyone else in the public? So again,
I see a hand on the board.
what we're doing right now is clarifying questions.
We see a hand up on the board in the meantime, Jeannie.
Oh, Clark, please.
Mike, right?
I'm Jack.
No, Mike. I know you're Jackie. The gentleman, you're Mike, right? Michael, forgive me, Michael. I think you're right on the mark, and as I recall, during some of our discussion about organizing this charter review, there were elements that discussed the idea of maybe deferring some actions, and I think we were committed to trying to get matters of substance forward, and the nice stuff that was good to have, we understood we may in fact have to defer action on that.
I don't think we had that conversation.
Well, I was in there that my understanding was if we got to the point where there were issues that were not readily or easily resolved, that in fact
Yes.
there was room for those to be deferred to a later date.
Yes, if things were too complicated, not
Right.
whether they were weighty or not. Yeah.
So, in Michael's concern, yes, we did discuss that potential. And my understanding also is that this charter review, yes, we had a charter review board, but during the course of our regular governance, there are options for us to address charter issues down the road, not necessarily in the absolute charter review format that we're doing now. There's no other provisions for us to look at issues in the charter?
So let's just raise the questions now, and then we'll do the research. I think that becomes a little complicated. So again, I think what we're trying to do now is just get out any questions that we have. But what would it look like? So I'm making my notes. So what would it look like if we split and took up some of those for the vote and not all of them, okay?
Our committee discussed on a couple of occasions whether we should request more time, that we were told that it was up to us when we were finished. It was also really expressed to us that it was important to meet this deadline so that these items could be given light of day on the ballot in March. I know that we've spoken several times about the amount of work that we've put into this and how tight the deadline was. We spent the amount of time on this that we thought was required. We think our report is thorough.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do think that that is a very significant consideration for us, that we asked you to take this on. We had very strong feelings on the board that it needed to be on the general election. We did not want to have a special election, and that you guys needed to do the work double fast. So that does raise some, I think, I don't know if they're ethical issues, but it's feeling sort of like an ethical issue of asking you guys to work that hard and then for us to say that. Having said that, I think there are valid reasons why something might not be as fully baked for the community, not your part, but in terms of the community's understanding and the select board's understanding. So I think it's something for us to grapple with, but we did put the committee under very significant time constraints and stress, and you guys rose to the challenge and have created an amazingly good piece of work. An excellent piece of work.
Thank you.
So all we're doing right now is just laying out what's out there that we need to either clarify, what we need to clarify and think about going forward, and then we'll do that. Anything else? Stu, are you wanting to say something? You got that look on your face.
God bless social media. I have received a text that indicates Governor Phil Scott's language. Yes, I am here with you. He basically looked at two issues, primarily the situation where the state is raising the age, as Kelly Carroll has pointed out, for certain crimes, raising the age of juveniles up to potentially to the age of 24. His other overriding concern was that he thought that issue should be debated at the legislative level, and if worthy, made law statewide and not in a patchwork quilt.
Okay.
That's a very brief summary of what I was saying.
Thank you. But those are his two big concerns, so that's good.
I'd like to share too, our committee did consider, let's say, legal culpability for voters, right? And one of the things that we connected this with is there's many adults that for whatever reason can't be held legally liable for different kinds of crime, can't be culpable for reasons of dementia or, all sorts of issues, and those people are still eligible to vote. And so we didn't think that it was appropriate to apply a different set of standards to 16 and 17-year-olds than are applied to adults.
Okay. Thank you.
And perhaps if I could just wrap up with kind of the timeline that we're looking at. Basically, as you have already said, Jeannie, you want to set the hearing dates. We have proposed hearing dates of January 27th, 2025, and February 10th, 2025,
yep.
Which are regular select board meeting dates. They would also allow you to change the wording at least 10 days before the vote, should you decide to do so, which is one of the statutory issues that you may address. But this board has two more meetings, the 9th and the 16th of December. This must be warned by December 27th, so it may require a special meeting if we haven't got all the language down. But having said that, council will take the wording that you have provided to you the gist of it, and try to put it into ballot language. Most ballot item language will read, shall the voters of the town of Bennington do such and such and such and such. And it's a yes or no vote. Each of these questions will be proposed as part of the warning. The select board, when it gets the warning provided to you, can decide which of those questions go forward. You don't have to take them all. You can take none.
Yeah, we're aware of that. We're aware of that.
I understand.
Yeah.
This is as much for the public.
Okay, but I think that's a slightly different question than the one we were just discussing, about whether we say, okay, these feel like we're ready to go forward with them, the others we want to hold back. That's a different conversation.
Well, you will ultimately have the final decision.
I get it. It all looks the same in the wash.
And that was my point, just
yeah.
to explain what the process is. So
can I ask, so are you saying that after the February 10th vote, after the February 10th public hearing, we still would have time to change?
You do.
We have 10 days before March 4th.
That's correct.
Is our deadline. Okay.
That's.
Ballots go out. How early do ballots go out? Absentee?
I don't have that information.
A couple of weeks.
Well,
We got to make sure ballots aren't going out absentee.
Exactly.
Before we change something.
Well, I would suspect that after the second hearing, you wouldn't be changing wording, but I would suspect that after the first hearing, you might. But that's just, I mean.
All right, but I think Nancy raises a very good point. Could we find out when the absentee ballots go out? Because that's a better indicator of what our deadline will be.
I will do so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. Any other clarifying questions, concerns that we want to raise on this? No? Then thank you for this very, very good work. This is like really amazing work, and we truly appreciate.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to change gears a little bit. So next up is the Bennington revolving loan discussion with Shannon.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see such a full house tonight. I'm Shannon Barsati, Community Development Director for the town. And just since we do have a good audience here, to let everyone know a little bit more about that program, you can go to the town's website, benningtonvt.org, and I think it's in two places, doing business in Bennington. If you see that first, or if you go to departments under community development, there's a loan description and application, so you can learn more about the program there. The intention of this program is really to help small businesses, particularly those that can't get a traditional bank financing or have a gap in financing. And so the way that works is applicants can meet with me in the town office. They turn in an application that includes a business plan, a credit report, some collateral, on the loan, et cetera. And then I review that with Beth Antonioni from the Community Development Department, and we bring it to the town manager, Stu Hurd, for his review and recommendation. And then we have an executive session with the select board to look at all the financial information, look at the intent of the application, and then we're here tonight after that process for the select board to vote on the approval and to have that in a public session. So that's why we're here. And in your packet, you have a memo about the latest application. It's from Douglas Cardoza and Patrick Kincaid to fund equipment and renovations for their new business, which is going to be called the King's Knitwit. And according to their business plan, that's going to be a high-end yarn and knitting supply store. They'll also be selling gourmet coffee, tea, and wine, as well as drink accessories, and doing a lot of community events. So that location will be at 520 Main Street. And this loan application is really contingent on them closing on that property because the property will be the collateral on the loan. So that is the former Allegro restaurant was at 420 Main Street. So that's one of those vacant spaces that we really are hoping to have filled downtown. So a brief summary of their application and the request is a $30,000 loan request for, as I said, equipment, and most of that, I think it's about $10,000 for equipment and $20,000 for renovation of the existing space. And that would be, the suggested terms would be a 10-year amortization at an interest rate of 1%. Given that this is in the designated downtown, we historically have given very low interest rates because we want to incentivize businesses opening in our designated downtown district. And the scope of work would be purchasing and installing the commercial kitchen and office equipment and doing renovations to the building. Given that it was a restaurant for so many years, there's quite a lot of cleanup that needs to happen to bring it back up to a new space. And then the collateral will be the second position on the commercial real estate, which is valued at $330,000. And then the contingencies are having all appropriate permits and insurance obtained, and then also closing on the property, which they're hoping to do within the next couple of weeks. And then we have reviewed the application and supporting documentation and believe that their application is within the scope of the town's revolving loan program, and we request that the select board move to approve the loan terms as outlined above.
Super. Could I have a motion to approve the loan terms as outlined above, and a second, and then we'll, for the purposes of discussion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any discussion? None?
If I can just make a comment. Shannon, this is interesting. This is a good example of a resource that the town offers to potential businesses in the town, and particularly in the downtown district. We've heard recently from the public about the downtown needing town support. I think it's you laid that out at the beginning about how to access that resource. This is a very good example of what the town does provide in terms of resource. A 1% revolving loan is pretty resourceful. So thank you for administering.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Anyone from the public? All right, then I think we're voting without Sarah. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. One, okay.
Are you abstaining? You abstaining?
No, Sarah's not.
Oh.
Sarah's, yeah, so, yeah.
Is that an abstention?
I think she's just not here for the vote. Okay, so, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Shannon.
and please thank them for moving to our community.
I will. And
From Georgia, yes.
Yeah, and they had a similar shop. I forget the name of the town in Georgia, but it's a similar size to Bennington. And so keep your eyes and ears open for, ribbon cutting and a new shop in the new year.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Next up is ARPA funds expenditure resolution, which we have in our packet. Who is speaking to this?
Melissa.
Melissa Courier, please.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Courier, Finance Director for the town. And included in the Select Board packet was a resolution to expend ARPA funds. Included in that was also a memo explaining it. I'll try to, I don't know if you want me to read it or paraphrase it.
You might want to paraphrase it because I'm not sure everyone in the audience has had a chance to read it.
So the deadline to obligate ARPA funds is December 31st of this year, 2024.
Let me just interrupt, and Melissa mentioned that the key word there is obligate.
Correct.
That is an important word in this discussion. Thank you.
It is. If they are not obligated by the deadline, those funds must be returned to the federal government. Currently, the funds, the remaining ARPA funds have been discussed as being used for the Ben High project, but the Ben High project has not been completely finalized. There's still a lot in the works right now. So to avoid any potential loss of ARPA funds, I've been working with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, as well as our auditor, to utilize an alternative to obligating those funds. And that is this resolution that says that because we elected the standard allowance of $10 million to spend on government services, that we can do that and use it for government services such as payroll and benefits. And by doing that, and expending them right now, we would be able to use them before 12/31, and those funds would then, by spending them on payroll and benefits, then that would be returned to our fund balance, and we would be done, increasing our fund balance at a time. We could later use those funds for a different purpose as such the select board decided to use them for. Sorry, I'm not really great at this public speaking part.
All right. And so the amount, the funds would be $2,595,324.26. Is that?
That's correct. That amount,
I've never said a number quite. Yeah.
That amount is reflective of the amount of ARPA funds that we have not already spent on previously obligated and agreed upon and approved projects.
All right. So for the purposes of discussion, can we make a motion to accept this resolution and then have discussion? And we'll have discussion both from Select Board and from the public. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. So we want to make that motion to accept this resolution.
I move that we accept the resolution.
And for purposes of discussion, I'm going to be seconding the motion.
Great. All right. Discussion. Select Board? Clark?
I just have some more of my financial ignorance questions here. Could you explain to me the term fund balance? What is that? I'm not familiar with that term.
Fund balance is, if you were to compare it to a private company, would be like your owner's equity. It's the sum of our balance sheet.
Melissa, can you speak directly into the microphone? It's difficult to hear you over here.
The fund balance would be comparable to owner's equity for a private company, but it is basically our assets. It's from the balance sheet. It's our assets. It's the net of our assets and liabilities.
Okay. And I'm, again, confused. Obligated or expended, terms as refer to this fund. Now, again, correct me if I'm mistaken, but since I've been on this board and before the board, I keep hearing about the almost $3 million in ARPA fund that was going to be dedicated to the Ben High project, and concurrent with that, some other funding dedicated to the skate park. So these discussions, in fact, were not a manifestation of obligated funds, and the $500,000 loan that I believe was approved back in August, that doesn't count as an expended or obligated fund either?
I have in preparation for that question, I have that per the Treasury, and this is information that I received from VLCT, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, that as stated in the final rule, obligation means an order placed for property and services and entering into contract subawards and similar transactions that require payment. It is my understanding that the agreements and work that's been done already, that it is still contingent and it is not final. And I think that Dan or Stuart could speak more detail to that, but that it is not final and that there's still more approvals that the select board needs to give.
But there is a difference between the 500,000 that was pre-development money. That money is not included in here. That's why I read the amount. So that money has already been put into action. This is the 2 million and change. Yeah?
No, that number comes directly from, so on an annual basis, I have to report to the federal government the amount of money that we have already spent or obligated. That report occurs, it's due in April, and it's as of March 31st. So as of March 31st, I reported a dollar amount. I don't have that in front of me, but I took the total amount of ARPA funds and deducted what has been reported as of March 31st of 2024. And that is where I got the number of that's in the resolution.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'm not done.
Okay.
Melissa, who started the process?
Clark was still.
Oh, sorry.
Clark was still had questions. We didn't realize that.
I guess maybe this is not you, but in the big picture, I believe, if not maybe 2-3 meetings ago, and then I think even back in September, there were, I think, a member from the audience, and I think maybe even Ms. White, asked about potential problems with timely expenditure obligation or whatever term you want to use with these funds. And I don't believe those questions were ever answered or addressed. And the process that brings us to where we're at here as a member of the select board is all news to me. If this was a problem or a potential problem, I kind of would like to have heard about it sooner than later, other than being presented with a document where I'm being asked to approve a resolution for a problem that, when I heard people ask about it, went unanswered.
This is something that we've been discussing, I've been discussing with the town manager and assistant town manager for a number of months.
But not with the select board.
That's actually not entirely correct, Clark. When the ARPA funds originally came to the town of Bennington, it was made clear to the board at that time that if they were not expended or, quote, obligated by December 31st, 2024, they would be returned to the federal government. That's been clear, I think, from day one. Now, you might not have been on the board when those discussions were held, but that has always been the case. And I think we've heard as we've moved forward with the Ben High project, this date of December 31st is fast approaching. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This process allows us to preserve those funds for our use rather than return them to the federal government and have the taxpayers lose the opportunity to use those funds for the Ben High project, if the Ben High project fails, for any other project that might come forward. This is the only way, I think, given the short time frame we have, that we can preserve those funds for the benefit of the Bennington taxpayers.
Again, as I just stated, I heard at least 2 individuals ask specifically about a cutoff date, an endpoint for these funds. And again, I never heard an answer. You may have been having these discussions prior to my coming on the board. Okay, I'll get that. Since I've been on the board, I have not been party to or privy to what's resulted in this memorandum.
Well, our hope has always been that the Ben High project would go forward. Unfortunately, we find ourselves running up against a deadline that we had hoped we would not face.
If I could, the alternative would have been that the money was spent already, and therefore this resolution would not be necessary. The project that this board agreed to spend the money on is in flux. We're waiting for details on it. This is the way to continue to have that money preserved. I disagree with my fellow board member that there is any problem here that wasn't discussed earlier. This is a way to preserve funds.
And clearly a way that many communities have done so, and that is also included in the memo.
My position is, I've asked questions, I've heard questions asked, and I don't believe I've heard an answer. Now, if someone can point me toward, some board minutes or...
Can we get back to the resolution on the floor,
Excuse
please?
me, Mr. Woods, I did not interrupt you. I expect you to not interrupt me.
Point of order.
I'm going to remind everyone to remain civil.
Then don't interrupt me. Be civil. Don't interrupt people.
Please be civil.
Interrupting me is not civil. I did not interrupt anyone.
So interruptions are not great. When you are interrupted, you can be civil in your response. So the point is that we have this in front of us now, which is what I think Ed was trying to get to. We are at the point where we have a solution for not returning $2.5 million to the federal government, because we have two really great projects that are in the works and are moving forward. And if we need a little bit more time for Ben High to cross the finish line, then dadgummit, we're going to give it to them. Because, in fact, this is a project that not only the Select Board has repeatedly voted in favor of, but this community has been strongly in favor of. And what we are talking about right now is not giving back $2.5 million. That is the issue in discussion right now. And if it should have been more timely, maybe it wasn't more timely because we did not anticipate having Hell Resources not be able to do the presentation several meetings ago now. I think without that, this would not have come up. But because there is a hiccup, we are looking at this. So please continue, but please let's keep it civil.
Are you done?
Okay, thank you.
Now, I'm not, I asked you if you were done before I didn't want any interruptions. I didn't want to interrupt.
That's why I said please continue.
Right. Again, I am not comfortable with something being presented at the last moment.
It's been in your packet since Thursday.
Oh yes, Thursday, 4 days. And at what point have I had to discuss the content of this or review
right
this?
Now.
So again, so it's not the, so it is right now. It's the last moment in my mind. You want us to discuss this and then sign a document approving it. Is that correct?
Clerk, as a select board member, you do know that you can go to town staff anytime. So this was in our packets. This went out Thursday. It might have gone out Wednesday, but I'm assuming Thursday. And at that point, you are, as a select board member, able to go in and talk with the manager, the assistant town manager, with Melissa, with anybody else you want to. So there is no reason for us not to have, we have access. Do I wish we could, why would we have done this 3 months ago? Because until the Hales were not able to come with the final documentation, we assumed we were on track to meet the December 31st deadline.
And spend the money as this board had approved in the past.
Yes, and when it became clear that that was not going to happen, thank goodness the staff did not sit on their hands, but they figured out, they went to VLCT, which is Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and said, how do we make sure we don't lose $2.5 million? And they said, hey, there are a heck of a lot of other communities, and I didn't count, there's probably 70 other communities that have gone down this route. This is not a novel solution. This is the expected solution when you know what the project is, but you may not be able to get the funds obligated or expended by December 31st. So all we're doing is trying to make sure that we don't give back $2.5 million and that we go forward with 2 projects that are really important to this community. Housing and recreation have been on the top of every single list anytime this community has been asked what they care about. Anytime. So, you know, do we all wish it weren't happening this way? Don't we wish we were transferring, like Ben High was in Hale's hands and we were sailing forward? Absolutely. So I think the question here is, if we have questions about, you know, is it legal? You know, it looks like it pretty darn well is. You know, are there questions that we have about that? That is the discussion that we're having on this resolution.
If I could, on those lines, the experts that we've heard from collectively on this issue include our town manager, assistant town manager, director of finance, town council, town auditor, and VLCT director of municipal operations support, where we learned of those 70 other towns that are in the exact process that we are in tonight. I'm leaving my decision up to the intelligence that I've gotten from the experts that I surround myself with. Thank you, Melissa and team, for putting this together.
Tom.
Yes, Nancy.
I think
sorry.
One of the things I'm struggling with on this is, as Ed pointed out at the very beginning here, is the word obligated. I think in my mind, and in a lot of other people's minds, we'd obligated this money. So is there a different definition of obligated that the ARPA plan uses that is different from what I may be interpreting obligated to mean?
Dan is also stepping forward.
So here's the issue, Tom and others. It was obligated, but there were conditions to those obligations that have not been met. So it is now technically not obligated. And in order for us to obligate it, we would have to enter into a new agreement within the next several weeks and obligate them again without condition. So I think the risk is too high, and that we believe it's our duty to the taxpayers to preserve these funds. There really does not need to be discussion about how you're going to spend these funds in the future, because these go into the fund balance. They become the exclusive purview of the select board to determine how to spend those. Now, we all know how many people think it should be spent, and we all hope that's how it will be spent. But what this does is it preserves the select board's authority, ability, and opportunity to spend this money in the way that they see fit. And that's all that's happening tonight if you vote for this resolution.
We're preserving the funds.
Yeah.
Yes, we're preserving the funds. Thank you, Dan. Nancy?
Dan, what conditions were not met?
So there are many conditions, but one of the major ones is we did not receive notice from our partners to proceed in a timely fashion, so they cannot commit to moving forward in the time period that the development agreement contemplated.
And who's your partners? Hale Resources?
Hale Resources is our partner. Yep.
They're the town's partners.
So, as you know, Nancy, we were going to be here a few weeks ago, and now we will be probably in another couple weeks, to renegotiate that development agreement because of these conditions that neither the town nor the Hale Resources could meet, given the information we had at the time.
Now you're going to renegotiate the agreement?
Well, that's why we were going to talk to the Hales, and why we will talk to the Hales. Yes, and you've seen the memo, you've commented on the memo, you knew that we were considering renegotiating the agreement, yes.
Okay. What led to this memo, the one that you wrote? What led to you writing this memo? Who asked you to write the memo?
Staff. That's the conversation we just had.
But how long have you been talking about this?
We've been talking about it for probably, I'd say, since September. We began to get concerned that the conditions being placed on the project were becoming quite onerous, not only for the Hales, but for our ability to release those funds. We plan to have the Hales before you on October 14th. They asked for a continuance because they had not finished their financial due diligence. They still have not finished their financial due diligence, and therefore, we know that this was available to us, but we weren't going to use it unless we absolutely had to. I mean, and that's what staff are supposed to do. We're supposed to cover all the bases to make sure that the taxpayers of the town of Bennington are protected. And just a little historically, Bennington went through a very, very detailed process of selecting projects that it was going to support with the ARPA funds. Many of the towns on this list did not do that, and they moved very quickly to obligate those funds for payroll and other reasons because they didn't have projects in mind for them. So this process has been used by many of these communities early on. We had projects we hoped to go forward, and we had identified them, and we worked very hard to make them go forward. Unfortunately, we're at a point where we believe, that is the staff, believe that this memorandum and this resolution needs to be approved by the board in order to preserve those funds for future use. That's what we are here for. It's very straightforward, Nancy.
But 70 other towns have already done this?
That's correct.
And we've waited until the last minute? Is that because?
Because we had a project that we hoped would go forward.
I think it's inaccurate to say that 70 other towns have done that.
You don't have the money, is that why you have to redo the contract?
No. We're not here to discuss the development agreement. That's going to be forthcoming. But as far as, I just want to clarify, we do not know if 70 other towns have proceeded with this. We know that 70 other towns worked with VLCT to prepare for this. Whether or not they proceeded or not, we don't know.
But I guess the part I'm not missing, because we have the contracts, we've had the contracts with Hill Resources for the Ben High. That's why I thought our money is protected, and we have until the end of 2026 to spend it. So I don't understand why we're going through this tonight.
Well, I think, I just wanted to clarify one other thing.
Shannon, introduce yourself, please.
Oh, sorry. This is Shannon Barsati, Community Development Director. I think that the contingency of having that final development agreement needs to be in place, which we won't have. And just so that everyone understands, in many ways, this is going through this resolution is also a relief for Hale Resources and all of the other funders. The town's piece of funding, which you have to remember is only $2 million out of 50 million, is the only piece that has this deadline, right? So everyone has been, we've sort of put them, in between a rock and a hard place with this deadline. And if that goes away, they still are proceeding, trying to close on all of the other pieces as quickly as possible. But now that imposed deadline goes away. Does that make sense? I just want to make it clear that this isn't a bad thing for them. This is actually a relief, especially for all of the other funders that have been saying, oh, is the town's piece done yet? So it sort of takes the pressure off, and it still preserves the funds. I just wanted to clarify that.
And I do want to move to public as soon as we can. So I think if we have more questions, absolutely ask them, but let's give the public an opportunity too.
Where's the $2.6 million in ARPA right now?
It's listed as a reserve in the general fund.
And the voters didn't have to create that fund?
No. And we're not, I don't want to get it.
I know, but because I looked online and I read the law, and it kind of concerns me.
No, the law says the voters may create reserves.
Thank you for that clarity, Steve.
And I'll do this very quickly if I can, Madam Chair. When the town develops its budget and is asking the taxpayers of the town to create a reserve, those reserves are listed on the ballot. Some 7 or 8 of the reserves we now have among the general, highway, and fire fund are included on the first page of that ballot. So the voters, when they go into the booth, they know that these funds, if the ballot budget is approved, will be set aside and reserved for the purposes listed. That is what the voters have the right to do.
Okay.
The town, through the select board, has a right to create reserves with funds that come to it for a designated purpose that are not taxpayer-based. For instance, the reappraisal monies that Mr. Perkins related to. That has been a $40,000 to $42,000 annual donation or grant from the state of Vermont that is set aside for reappraisal. Every town in the state gets some money for reappraisal based on whatever the state of Vermont determined those things were. Those funds have been coming to us for almost 30 years, and those can only be used for a reappraisal. Because I, in fact, went to the state of Vermont and wanted to use them to do some tax mapping, and they said no. They must be used for a reappraisal. So that $1.whatever million that is set aside for that purpose by law.
Okay. Well, I had designated and dedicated funds. So should the ARPA money be in one of those rather than a reserve?
It's a term, we show them all as reserves. When our auditors look at our reserve funds, they list them as dedicated or designated reserves and undesignated reserves generally. Our reserves, which have gone back all the way to when I came to work here in 1973, have been audited every year on an annual basis. Every auditor designates or undesignates the reserves. So there are some reserves that by the voters are designated, or by law are designated, or by the spirit of the donation. For instance, when we receive donations to help us purchase a dog for the police department, we are not allowed to use those donations for anything but that, because that's what the donation is for. So we have monies that are donated, we have monies that are granted, we have monies that by statute are provided to us. Those all become designated reserves. And then there are reserves that are set aside from the sale of equipment or property that the town can establish a reserve on its own, such as our capital facilities.
And this money would be going into?
It's shown on that list.
The ARPA money is going to go in, I understand that, going back to last year, and money pops out of the budget.
In this case, the ARPA funds will simply go into the fund balance. When this resolution is passed, those funds will move into the fund balance. It will simply grow our fund balance by the $2.5 million, which will allow us at some future point, based on the select board's actions, to pull those funds out of the fund balance and use them for a project that we believe is appropriate.
You don't have to take that out and put it in the separate $2.6 million account now?
No. Yes, you can, but you don't have to, because it just goes into the fund balance.
Yeah. I guess my concern is citizens, taxpayers, voters, we can't find out anything on our end how it's going to impact us. Nobody wants to talk about what the new deal is. I mean, I've had all the signed contracts. I pick them up at the office every year, so it concerns me. Dan, you said we're not going to talk about the agreement or anything.
Nancy, it is not the agenda item. That's why we're not talking about it. We will talk about Ben High when the Hales come to make their presentation. Right now, that is not the agenda item. The only agenda item that we are focused on at this very moment is the resolution to expend ARPA funds. That is the resolution. That is the only conversation. By law, we warn an agenda. The items on the agenda are what we can discuss. And that is so that people can come and be part of the discussion. So we can't have a discussion on anything we want. It has to be warned on the agenda.
You can't talk about the Ben High with not having the town.
We're not talking about Ben High at all. We're talking about we're talking about $2.5 million in ARPA funds that we need to either agree to preserve, or we need to send back to the federal government by December 31st.
Okay, if the Ben High project was to collapse, we would still have the $2.6 million.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
And then who would decide what would happen with that?
The select board.
The select board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The public is really anxious to
I'm right
speak.
here. I'm still here. Still here.
Janie, can we just take 2 seconds? I need to replace this camera or else it's going to die. 2 seconds.
Let's do that. We're taking a break. We're taking a 3-minute break. Nice. Okay.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Sarah's up next.
I just stuck something in my mouth and I'm drinking water. Okay. Give me a hot minute here. So I as well thought the money was already obligated. And when I asked questions about this, it was fairly vague, just saying that we're being cautious. So I am still not totally clear about this, and I have hesitations because I have concerns that this will just go to payroll expenses, and the next board, I don't really know where it's going to go. I think many of us might think it's not going to go to Ben High, might not go to housing. So I really want to know for certain that it's going to go for housing, going to go to the skate park. Maybe there's more wording that could go in there. I'm not sure, legal wording that could go in there. And then also looking at state and local fiscal recovery funds, briefly, because some of the explanation I got to me was just being cautious, to me was vague, and I could have followed up with that. I just actually didn't have time to do that. So under the SLRF, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which could have been my very quick search, said that it wasn't legal to put in payroll expenses for that period. And that could have been very inaccurate because of my quick search. But I'm not sure. So right now I'm not sure if this is...
Yeah, so these are ARPA funds.
Hold on one second. Thank you. I'm still speaking. Yeah. So I'm really not sure where I fall on that because I still believe that we already obligated that money. I don't know. So if there's any more explanation that I will be certain on, that will go to housing, or any wording that can help with that.
If I may, Sarah.
Yeah, please.
If this resolution is passed by the board and these monies are set aside into the fund balance, the decision of how they are spent will rest with this board. So if it's this board's desire that they only be used for housing, then you can do so as we move through the future. Our hope is that we will hear from Hale Resources that they are ready to proceed and that we will be able to move these funds back into this project to help this project succeed. But this is a means of holding those funds and making sure that they are available for use by the town of Bennington and not returned to the federal government, and we will never see them again. So I don't know, I'm not really sure I understand why people are being cautious about saving the monies for use by the town of Bennington. That's troubling. I can understand concerns about the Ben High project. I can understand concerns about a whole host of things. But this is a legitimate way to preserve those funds, and I would encourage the board to approve it so that we can do so and we can move forward.
Yeah, I understand that, and I want to reserve these funds for our town, but your answer to me is we're being cautious. That's what I was mentioning. I didn't want to say that outright, but your answer to me is we're being cautious.
That's what we should be doing when $2.5 million is at risk of being returned to the federal government. We should be cautious.
I agree. I think.
But we shouldn't be 6 weeks before losing the money.
Nancy, please hang on. Are you saying that this board is the board that decides, or the incoming board?
Well, it'll be whatever select board is sitting at the time that the project comes forward.
Okay.
And if the project comes forward before April 1st of next year, then it'll be this board.
Okay. I guess that also leaves me with some hesitation. So yes, I see that, but yes, I'm not. Yes, so
I'm sorry, I don't understand that, Sarah, at all. But
I don't know. That's concerning. Because it was already in my mind obligated.
Unfortunately,
there are two terms. We're using obligated in the vernacular way, and we're using obligated in a legal way, and I think that's the confusion for all of us.
So I do believe that there is a deadline on some of the other funding for the Ben High project that will be in March. So if that answers that question, if the project, as it's conceived, is going to come to its to the select board, it should be before March, or certainly before April 1st.
Might there be any, excuse me, I was just chewing as I spoke. Was there any more legal wording that might be able to be in this document?
This document was, and Dan,
The answer is no, because it has to be very clearly going into the fund balance and not being designated to a particular project. So we could put it into the capital reserve if that would make you feel more comfortable. In fact, that's our recommendation, but we can't say it's going to be specifically for the Ben High, because then it's not following the process of going to the fund balance and then into an existing reserve fund, which is what's required. So let me get to the obligated thing. So we could, and frankly, I would be happy if we did, because it would make this project more likely to proceed. We could simply say, we're spending the money on Ben High. We're going to re-obligate it. We're not going to care about the conditions in the development agreement. We're just going to obligate it to Ben High. What that does is that puts that money at risk if for some reason that project doesn't move forward. Because if we've obligated to that project and then it doesn't move forward, those funds disappear and go to the federal government as of the end of 2026. So we have two options here, really. We can say, you know what, we're absolutely 100% confident that everything's going to work out and we're going to obligate it to Ben High. I love that option myself, because it puts a lot of pressure to make that project work. Or we can do what I think is probably the most responsible thing for our taxpayers, is give this board the flexibility to use that fund, that money how it sees fit going forward, which I think many of us hope is the Ben High project. But all this resolution does is give this board, you 7 people here, the authority to use that money in the way that you see fit.
Thanks. I think that helps a little bit to clear that up.
Thank you.
A tad.
Clark?
Thank you for that information, Dan. Another of my questions is, God forbid, Ben High project fails. Even if we obligate this money, where does that money go at that point? So the Ben High project goes under what you just said. We obligate it, boom, here today for the Ben High project. If it goes forward, we're golden. If it fails, we're where we're at if it doesn't go forward in the first place. So
we're giving the money back to the federal government if we don't spend it on that project by 2026.
Correct.
So you can obligate it for anything you want without conditions by the end of this year, and you have until the end of 2026 to actually expend that money on that particular project. If you do not, then that money goes back to the federal government. So
and that's the risky. That's the risky path to go. Yeah. The conservative path to go is to sign the resolution,
now, put it into the fund balance, allow this board to decide how to spend that money.
Yeah, with the full understanding that that this board's intention is to spend that money on Ben High. And
from March 28, 2022, this board agreed to spend $2.960 million between the Ben High project and the skate park. That approval was done on March 28th of 2022.
All right, so what we're trying to do is preserve these funds in the most conservative way that we can. Can we take public questions at this point?
I just have one quick question.
Okay.
Dan, did you just say we could say this is obligated to Ben High tonight and have 2 years to spend it?
1 year to spend it on Ben High as we've obligated. Now, as right now, we don't have what the Treasury Department would consider a contract that fully obligates the funds. So we would have to negotiate that to make sure that that it's very clear that this money either goes to Ben High or it disappears. So we really only have two options, which is to obligate the funds for a project that will be expended before 2026, and that obligation has to happen by the end of this year and be expended by the end of next year, or we can simply sign this resolution, the money goes into the fund balance, all the federal requirements are disappear, and that money is then in the fund balance and can be expended at the discretion of this board.
Let me just restate that all the federal requirements will have been met.
Yes.
With this resolution. They don't disappear, they will have been met.
Absolutely. They don't follow the money into the fund balance. because we've already reimbursing ourselves for money we've already spent.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Yes.
So unequivocally, for the past couple of years, the commitment has been to spend this money for the Ben High project. If that is our hard and fast commitment, I think we go forward with what you just proposed, Dan. We spend the money, we obligate the money, we've met the letter of the law, we've met the intent and the goal of this town to support the Ben High project, and we move forward. Now, we make that obligation, and God forbid the Ben High project falls apart. We are in the same boat we're in either direction.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
If we obligate the funds to the Ben High project and it doesn't go forward, the federal government will take that $2.3 million from the town. If we sign this resolution, that
And what does the town lose in them taking that money back?
$2.5 million.
No, in terms of operating everyday expenses, the money this town is obliged to spend to maintain the town, that money going back to the federal government does what? The Ben High project's gone.
Yes.
So the money is gone. How does that impact on how the town is going to operate then?
We will then have a less of a fund balance. We'll have a $2.5 million less in our fund balance. So the money that we're going to be spending this ARPA funds on based on this resolution has already been expended. So that money has been expended, and then the ARPA money will reimburse the town for those funds that have already been expended, therefore increasing the fund balance.
Making those funds available to
making those funds available to the select board to expend as they see fit.
To use, yes, and hopefully use as
Yes.
housing and recreation, which are the priorities. Can we move to the public? Because there are people hopping up and down that want to speak. Is that okay?
It's okay with me.
All right. Ned, you are up.
Ned Perkins, I understand the money goes back. You've got $2.2 million.
Speak right into them.
$2.2 million or whatever. But you really have no obligation legally to spend it on the Ben High project. That's correct, right? You could spend it on new cars for everybody if you wanted to, right? Right. And would it require a town vote or a town meeting vote to proceed with the Ben High project? I'm just not sure with all those contracts how that worked.
No.
No, it would not. We have, so I think Ed just read the 2022 last vote on how we wanted to spend these funds after that very long, I think, 9-month process of figuring out what the town priorities were.
Actually compiling survey data that said that of the top priorities of taxpayers, the top two were housing and recreation, and the Ben High project checked both of those top priority boxes. So again, on March 28th, 2022, some of these folks were on this board at the time, so they remember, the final spending of $2.960 million was Ben High and the skate park. So I will tell you from my perspective.
Wait. ARPA money, is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
So now it's no longer tied, so.
That's what we're saying, right. So it wouldn't go to a town vote. It would be, we are your representatives.
There, but you have to do it all over again.
No. Yeah.
No.
You're going to have to vote again.
No.
It's not ARPA funds anymore once this resolution
So
happens.
if you want to spend $2.2 million
on new cars,
you're going to have to vote on it.
The select board will, yes.
The select board will vote. Correct.
Correct.
Not necessarily the town.
The select board will vote on that, yeah. Other folks? Yes, Lily.
Hi, I'm Lily West. So to clarify, understanding, I think you guys have explained it really well. It's a little confusing, but I think I get it. The developer, I understand how long things take. So the developer is delayed, Hale Resources, right? So there was conditions for them to receive this funding from the ARPA funds. And that condition, kind of like a loan commitment, it's not there to get this money by the end of this year. So now, in order to keep the $2.5 million in the town, the way to preserve that is to put it into the town final balance. Okay. So then, to kind of couple what you ladies were concerned about, so because it's already been voted and planned for this great need of housing and inside recreation that the Ben High project is going to do, with the funds in the balance sheet, it's going to be like say next month, like January or February, the funds will be there because we kept them, because obviously that's the clear choice. We don't want to lose $2.5 million. But it'll be you all's decision on delegating that money out. And it's already been decided, so it's kind of an easy, am I understanding that right? Okay.
Are you asking a question? Because I can answer that for you.
Yeah, I'm kind of like stating what I'm understanding, I'm hearing.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
you're sort of repeating back your understanding, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
The money, I would hope that it would be this board's intention to honor the decision that was made on March 28th of 2022 to fund the Ben High project to the amount that was agreed to back then. Should a Ben High project become a viable project, that is my intention, and I know that's the intention of some board members. This money protects it in the event that Hale Resources comes back to us and says something that the town can't perform with, some obligation that the town can't meet. Ben High comes off the table. This town staff would ask this board to reconvene and reconsider how to spend that money.
Okay.
My intention will be to look for housing and recreation, because that's how, and I should clarify that the recreation part of it is the Ben High Skate Park. There's a small recreation piece because there's a gymnasium available, there's a senior center space, so there's some recreation involved in the Ben High project as well. My intention will be to see that money through to what the voters said in that survey 2.5 years ago, and the way that this board voted on that 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I think we have an obligation to do that.
Agreed. And that clarifies, I think, the concern that I think a couple of you had said, to make sure that that does get allocated how it was initially intended to. But I think it's very clear. I mean, we don't want to lose $2.5 million for the town.
I certainly don't.
Yeah. I think from what I understand now, it seems like a clear decision to do the resolution. But thank you.
Thank you, Lily.
Yes. Susan. It's getting late enough, I'm losing people's names.
Susan Plaisance, Bennington. I hope this is allowed, but Stephanie Mulligan was here for the whole meeting, but is going on vacation tomorrow and hadn't packed yet. So she asked me to make a statement for her, if that's okay with the select board.
I don't have a problem with that.
Right, and you're on tape, so.
I'm sorry?
You're on tape, so if Stephanie doesn't want it said, she will know.
Well, I'm not Stephanie Mulligan, but that's how this starts out. I'm a Shaftesbury resident and a member of the Bennington community. I was here today to support the use of the ARPA funds for the Ben High project. Although I'm not a Bennington property taxpayer, Bennington is my community. When I leave my house, I drive south to shop, eat, work, and send my children to school, rather than driving north to the Manchester community. The use of the ARPA funds will continue to add to the work that has been done to revitalize that area of town. It will also make an impact on the housing in Bennington. As an employer, it has been a struggle for new staff members to find housing in Bennington, and when they can't find housing, they head out of town. A few examples being Troy, New York, Arlington, Vermont, and they put down roots there and invest their time and their tax dollars in that community. In Stephanie's opinion, the improvements that have been made in Bennington through projects like, sorry, had to go to the next page, when they have where the projects have been made, like the Putnam project, have generated energy and brought some more life back to the downtown. The Ben High improvements would continue to strengthen the downtown and our community. Please take this opportunity to vote yes on the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Susan, for doing that. Anyone else in the public? Michael McDonough.
Still stiff. Yes. Yeah, the meeting might be the blame now, not the Christmas decorations. I know that it's hard to have this conversation without talking about Ben High. But it is much clearer and simpler than that. And I think that even the efforts to make it clear and simple have focused attention constantly back on Ben High. And the position that we are in tonight is that we don't accept this resolution to reserve those funds as town funds in, Stuart, name the fund again that it goes into.
It goes into the fund balance.
The fund balance, yes. If we don't reserve those tonight, there is no conversation beyond tonight. Ben High may still be able to move forward if all of the finances can be put together, but that's not the issue tonight. The issue tonight is $2.1 million, and I can't imagine any select board member, irregardless of whether you felt that you hadn't been given enough time, you should have known sooner, we thought we had already done it, but there should be no reason to not accept this resolution tonight to guarantee $2.1 million for the town of Bennington. Thanks. 2.59. Thank you.
2.59
Yes.
even.
Any other numbers that go behind that? Yeah.
It's worse.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Others? Yes. Chad. Just know if you're in the back of the room, it's not, we're not trying to see you, it's just hard to see you.
Sorry, still Chad Gordon, Bennington. I didn't plan to talk about this tonight, but without this proposal or resolution approved tonight, we wouldn't have $2.5 million to invest in housing, correct?
Correct.
So if we wanted to have a project after and not approve this, we'd have to get voter approval of some kind to get some kind of, or somehow we'd have to raise taxes for $2.5 million. I just want to remind people that if you're not aware of recent votes, I don't think the town's going to approve any $2.5 million projects. So I urge that you move forward and
it's a good point.
Make this resolution, because recent votes for the school for $2.5 million haven't passed. So I don't want to have to raise taxes by $2.5 million. So please approve this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Susan.
I'd like to speak on behalf of myself.
Okay.
Susan Plaisance from Bennington, Vermont. You know, I just wanted to take a minute. We elected a select board. We trust the select board because we elected them to public office. So I think you're going to do the right thing, and that is to not give back $2.59 million. I hate giving back stuff. I never would. But just a little private story from me to everyone here. I am one of Bennington's biggest cheerleaders, and I think most of you in this room know that. And I would never in a million years think that one of my children would move out of Bennington. Both of my children moved out of Bennington. They both live in New York because they simply couldn't find housing here. And my children are both professionals. I have a nurse and I have an athletic trainer who can certainly afford to buy homes in New York, but they couldn't here in Bennington.
Thank you.
Anyone else of the public that would like to speak on this before we vote? All right. Any last words from the select board? Yes.
Dan, please. Would you restate our options in terms of committing to the Ben High project with this money here and tonight versus what's in front of us? Which option is essentially bulletproof, or least bulletproof? How's that?
So there is no bulletproof option except for this resolution. This resolution preserves those funds regardless of what happens to the Ben High project and regardless of how quickly we renegotiate a development agreement that fully obligates the funds. So, however, if you felt, and I could certainly understand that no matter what, we want to make darn sure that this Ben High project happens and the town's going to do everything it can to do it, then you can say, you know what, we're going to negotiate an agreement, a development agreement with the Hales in the next 2 or 3 weeks, regardless of what they need to complete it, and get that signed and obligated and done by December 31st. And then we're going to make darn sure, regardless of what happens, that all that money is expended by the end of 2026. I think that probably, we will probably do that eventually, but I don't think that it's feasible to have it done by the end of this year. So I think the only safe way to proceed is with this resolution because it preserves these funds for anything that you folks think is appropriate. You could vote this evening to put it into the capital reserve fund to make sure that it only goes for capital projects like the Ben High, or you could simply leave it in the fund balance and vote to use it in some way in the future. So there really only are two options: sign this, do this resolution, or endeavor to renegotiate a development agreement before the end of the year, and then hope like heck that that money gets spent by the end of 2026.
All right, any other comments before we vote?
Yeah, just briefly, when I first saw this, this is a scary-looking memo, if you didn't know it was coming. I do think that the questions I had around it have been answered this evening. I do take comfort from the fact that we got guidance from the League of Cities and Towns because we are members with them because they can keep experts on staff that we would otherwise have to pay for. And the fact that our auditor has also looked at this also does give me comfort in voting for this measure. So if I did have questions earlier, I feel like they've been answered, and thank you very much.
I just want to echo what Tom said about the staff explanation of this in so many different ways that so many different people are trying to grapple with the definitions. We're not tax experts, and I'm grateful that you guys were able to come to the table tonight with this clearly explained, no matter how many times you were asked.
Great. Any other comments? All right, so that's...
Actually,
go ahead.
Dan, thank you for the explanation and the options. I appreciate that. And hopefully in the future, if it could come a little sooner so I could ask a few more questions before and not kind of inundate everybody with my questions, that would be very much appreciated. And yeah, I definitely want to keep these 2.5 in our community so we can have housing in our community that's much needed.
Great. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor of the motion on the table to accept this resolution, please say aye. Raise your hands. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes. All those opposed, please say no. All those abstaining, which means that you go with the majority vote and do not feel you have enough information to respond, please indicate.
You said
that is an abstention.
No, you said something, but I missed part of the
So an abstention on this vote means you do not feel like you have enough information to vote or you have a conflict. So that is what an abstention is. And abstentions mean you go with the majority, which means that you would also be expected to support this, even if you abstain. So all abstentions, please indicate. Nancy and Clark are abstentions. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And thank you for saving $2.59 million.
Thank you all.
What's this? Pass it down.
You're not going to sign it.
Okay.
All right, next up is the manager's report.
I have no action items for you this evening. Sorry. Thank you. I have no action items for you this evening. Just a couple of informational pieces. Given the fact that we are very nearly out of time on the Ben High project, we just went through that whole process. We have indicated to the state that we are filing umbrella application. Umbrella is the Brownfields Environmental Liability Limitation Act. Because the town has been so heavily involved in this project, we may have incurred liability if the project does not go forward and there is cleanup necessary. A number of items have been identified as being needed to be removed from the site. We are hopeful that the project will proceed and those things will be removed, but by filing an intent to use the BRELA program, the town is protecting itself from any liability for those potential pollution issues. We would enter into the BRELA program once the project goes forward. Some people have questioned what big state projects are coming up in the next year. I had indicated that, and many of you may know, the roundabout at Silk Road, so-called the Peanut Roundabout, will be proceeding in 2025. There was recently a public meeting about that project. The other major project that the state has been considering is the bridge at Miller's Toll. It's bridge number 6 on Route 9. That project was scheduled to go forward in 2024-25. Unfortunately, only one prospective contractor bid, and the bid was substantially over what the state had intended. So they are going to be rebidding. That project will probably now not go forward until 2026. Which is probably good news because we don't want both ends of the town all tied up in construction projects. The Select Board did ask me to look into potential listening session dates in January, and I have filed an application, and we have the room January 22nd, which is a Wednesday evening, should you decide not to meet on December 18th, which I think was a concern for the board. So just let me know. That would be the date that we would hold another listening session. Other things that have come up just recently, the Department of Environmental Conservation, Agency of Natural Resources, will be releasing, and it may be up on our website already, thanks to Jonah's speed and agility. There is a public hearing going to be held in this building on Thursday, December 5th at 6 p.m., wherein the state will come down and talk to us about the PFOA-related investigations that they have made over the last year. They are looking specifically at properties south of town and east of town, where PFOA has shown up in a couple of wells, actually more than a couple now, and so they will be coming down to talk about next steps, where those properties are, how they may be served, whether or not municipal water would be able to be provided to them or not. So if you're interested in that, it will be December 5th here at 6 p.m. Richard Speece, who is practically a citizen of Bennington for all of his time here over the years, will be down with some of his staff, and MSK Engineering and the town will also be represented at that meeting.
And Stu, I assume, because it's Richard, he's very good at communication, that they are noticing everyone in the affected area?
I'm sure that they're attempting to do that. I can't say yes, certainly, but that is generally their practice.
Can we make sure that they are?
We'll do our very best.
Thank you.
You keep giving me things to do.
I know, Stu.
Anyway, and just as a quick note, coming up on the annual budget process, we have two agencies that have now petitioned for funding. Both agencies, well, one of the agencies was funded at a lower level in years past. It is seeking to increase its funding, which requires a petition, and another agency, which has not yet been funded, has now petitioned to be on the ballot. So those will be placed on the ballot. They've received sufficient numbers of signatures, and they have been attested by the town clerk. And I believe that's all I have for you tonight.
Super.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Stu, the Bridget Miller's toll, is that not something that the town staff is capable of doing?
It is a state-funded bridge. Bridges over a certain length that are on state highways are federally obligated roadways. Thereby, the federal government picks up, in this case, I think it's 90% or 85%. The state picks up 10%, and the town only has to pay 5%.
We like that. Thank you.
It's like, do not go wishing for things. All right.
Question, can I
Go
ask?
ahead.
For the Ben High, the Brella application, will that cost our town anything?
No, it will not.
There won't be a cost ever?
Actually, the application cost is $500, but that was picked up by BCRC through a program that they have. So this is a liability protection. It's not a cost to the town. It will save us possible.
Well, why wouldn't Hill Resources do it?
So they may also do it as well. It's not limited to just the town.
Oh, okay, so everybody
Yeah.
involved is going to have it.
So we just want to, if for some reason we're in there operating that facility through our agents, we don't want to have any chance that somebody's going to say, hey, you're liable, because what the Brella program really is an insurance policy that the state gives the town that says if there's any environmental liability whatsoever, you're off the hook.
Okay. And the roundabout?
Yes.
Why did they give the presentation at Bennington College and not here?
I can't speak. Well, that same night, the Charter Review Committee was here.
And it's also located on properties that they own, and it is at their front
Bennington
door.
College is involved, benefits by the project, so yes.
And North Bennington is highly affected, and that is closer to their community.
Who pays to maintain South Road, Madison Road?
They did come before this board with the project.
They did before.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time.
We maintain Madison Road and Silk Road.
Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, but they do on the properties that are going to be impacted. All right, so the other thing that we have in here is the ongoing public records request. Clark, you had asked about why your requests weren't included, and it turns out that there had been prior communication about why. I don't know if you want to, if you want these added to the record, we can read them and add them, or, but they were, Jonah actually has an explanation that would then become public record, saying that because this was town-related request you were making, it really should come in off your select board email, and so he moved it from your Gmail to your select board email.
Are these going to continue to be published like this? Okay, I see it as intimidation, but...
Oh, I see it as, it's actually been, I don't see it as intimidation, I see it as information, and reading through some of the requests has been very enlightening and very disturbing. So
I think that...
and it is public knowledge. Anyone can ask that. It's not, all we're doing is not making Jonah have to tell you who has made a public records request. As he indicated in the beginning, the Secretary of State's office does this. They put it on their website. So we're just putting it in the manager's report, so it's available. But hopefully people will look at it, because
just ask why we're receiving it. We have received so much already.
Why are we receiving it?
Yeah.
because it's good public information. And it is public information, and the only other way that someone would see this is they would have to go to Jonah, and since the number of emails related to public records requests has increased from 30 to 300, and we aren't even finished with this year, 300 this year thus far, that's a huge increase. And so it started with us saying, why are we getting all these requests? And then we started looking at them, and it turns out, you know, there's, as we all know, a large percentage, more than way over 50%, are being, are from one individual. It's good to see what's being requested.
I guess
Anyone
to
that
me,
wants to see
it's
it.
not necessary for me personally to receive these. I guess if other people
I want the
see it, that's-
information.
Okay. I
Don't read
personally
them.
don't need it.
Don't read them
Don't read
then.
it if you don't want to, yeah.
Don't read them.
Good point, Jean.
Yeah, okay. So,
I don't want to be surprised, I want to be aware.
okay. So anything else? Oh, okay. Anything else on manager's report? Are we moving forward? No.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Upcoming agenda, we have CPARB coming before us. We have they have some recommendations. It is time for them to be looking at how they've been functioning, and I think they have some recommendations to us, and it looks like some of our initial intentions 3 years ago have not translated well. So I think that will be a very healthy and useful discussion.
I asked Tom to pay particular attention to that discussion since he was the founding liaison.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And as you have invited Bill Coleman from BCRC to come and talk about the town plan.
Okay, and he is available?
Hopefully he will be available for one of the next two meetings.
Okay, super. All right.
And we may have Ben on. Sorry to bring that up.
All right, so we could have a really full agenda. All right, so hopefully there's not anything else that's really pressing for the next agenda. Yeah. Oh, we do?
Yeah. It's not a big deal, I don't think. Most people will not remember the Woodford Packers site, which is essentially on the east side of town across from the Chain Up area. The state has offered the town the opportunity to apply for a grant to clean that site up and create floodplain storage there. It will be fully funded and by the state, and is actually the administration of it will be taken care of by BCRC. They're prepared to give a presentation at the next meeting to make sure the board feels comfortable with us moving forward with that project.
Okay, great. Okay, so BCRC could be here for 2 reasons. Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Dan.
That's great, thank you. All right.
Is that the grant that was awarded on Friday? No?
We haven't even applied for it.
Okay. Are you aware of the grant that was awarded on Friday to BCRC for the town? I'm not going to steal any thunder. Mr. Colvin can speak to it when he's here. Bill, if you're watching.
Jonah's getting up. No, he's
Jonah?
not. He's moving. Okay, never mind.
He is, he's not sure. Okay.
All right.
Little cliffhanger before the next meeting.
All right, we wait in anticipation. All right, other business. Nancy.
I'll make my 3rd or 4th or 5th request for the town purchasing policy to be on the agenda for a public discussion. And I'll also request that Dan and the BCRC come in and give a presentation on that bike path that the plans have been online for 5 or 6 years for County Street.
So can we, let's see, what do we have? The first meeting in January, because the meeting on the 16th, we're doing 2 things, warrants and warning the charter review, whatever they are, hearings. So first meeting in January, can we start with the purchasing policy? Because we want to have all of those policies reevaluated by the end of March. That's what we agreed to in the minutes a couple meetings ago. So we'll start with that one.
A couple months ago.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, briefly, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and reminder, sometimes Thanksgiving is not happy for everybody, and just be cognizant of your neighbors.
Okay. That was a bittersweet Thanksgiving. Okay. Ed?
So I have a quick statement that I want to read, and it's particularly appropriate after tonight's discussion and some of the discussions we've had leading up to tonight. It's important that we as a board rely on experts that are made available to us when doing the town's work, rather than, you know, a few sort of random opinions from the public that aren't clarified and aren't actually vetted through the expert network that I am talking about, particularly because it seems like some of those opinions tend to be in an effort to sort of stop progress, even when voters and taxpayers assure this board that that's our charge, and even when there is no taxpayer implication to some of those decisions that this board has to make. So I'm going to, again, ask my fellow board members to rely on experts. And unfortunately, there seem to be folks on the board who would rather allow misinformation and falsehoods to be posted, such as on their personal Facebook page that has carries a town logo, so it has this look of an official Bennington page, making it appear to be Bennington. Some of the things that people have reached out to me over the last week or so that are posted on that page that appears to be an official Bennington page would curl your hair if it's straight. It is, and I could read you some of the quotes, some of the things that this board has been called, some of it by a fellow board member, some of the insults. I'm going to save that for another day. I want to remind the public that I was elected to rely on experts and use sound judgment, and that's what I will continue to do, and I'd like to remind my fellow board members to do so as well. Not doing that just tends to spread false information, and it leads to the unnecessary public skepticism. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah. Well, Bill Clark was here at the beginning of the meeting during public comment to discuss, you know, what went into putting up the decorations. But if y'all haven't been downtown after dark, I think they really did an exceptional job this year. I think the downtown looks beautiful, and I thank them for what I'm sure was a ton of work getting all those lights strung around all those poles.
Clark?
What Tom said.
Jean?
So I meant to say the following at our last meeting, but I ran out of energy. In the November town employee newsletter we received earlier this month, there was a lot of information about work that was done by town staff. The projects included repairs to the Brooklyn Bridge, paving McKinley Street after sewer main work was done by town staff. The Hilder Hill sewer pump station was repaired, and materials out at the transfer station are being crushed and recycled to use on our roads. Thanks for all you do. I encourage everyone to say hello and thank you to the town staff when you see them out working. They are highly skilled and save the town a lot of money because of the work they can do for all of us. The office staff works hard every single day as well. I often hear, and we heard it tonight, how helpful they are when people call for information or have questions. So thanks to every single person who works for the town. You are an amazing team. Those of you who watch or attend our meetings know I usually share lighthearted, upbeat news during other business. Tonight, that is not going to be the case. What I'm about to say is outside my comfort zone, and I can't guarantee I won't cry. I cannot remain silent anymore. It is no secret the tone of our meetings has become toxic. There are sitting board members who accuse other board members and staff of doing nefarious things despite having factual information and documentation provided to them that prove otherwise. They have allowed themselves to be manipulated by a member of the community and are working with him behind the scenes and causing damage to our town. This small group of people spend hours on a daily basis doing nothing of value for Bennington. There are real, tangible consequences of these accusations and vitriolic behavior. Staff members are feeling demoralized and attacked by members of this board and members of the community. People don't want to run for the board. Many find our meetings too upsetting to attend, and there are people who have something to say that are too afraid to speak. We all must remember this small group of people do not represent who we are as a community. They are just the loudest. I leave every meeting feeling angry, sad, scared, disgusted, and alone. I feel the weight of the responsibility of being a select board member every day, and I often feel like a failure. I know there are people in this room who will find joy in hearing me say these things. If you are one of those people, it speaks to who you are as a person. I hear from people almost on a daily basis who thank me for being on the select board and say repeatedly they don't know how I do it. I appreciate the support, I really do. But if you want to really thank me, come to meetings, speak up, become informed, and get involved. I am well aware doing these things is probably not how you want to spend your time, and it can be uncomfortable. But for things to change, it is going to require all of us to be brave and do the work. Those of us who truly care about Bennington, and there are a lot of us, need to take back and drive the narrative. Positivity will win the day, but if the complacency I see and feel continues, the fabric of what makes Bennington the town we love will be ripped apart, and we will have no one to blame but ourselves. Thank you to those of you who come to meetings, speak up, and have constructive questions and comments to share. It makes an enormous impact. I am very grateful for all the people who serve on the various boards and commissions. I know it can be a thankless but very important job. I am begging those of you who are on the sidelines to step up and do your part for our town. There is no time like the present. I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for coming this evening.